Oh. Now, my wife is 9 months pregnant and right up there. Let's hope she doesn't go into labor while we're doing this. Just give me 2 hours, hon. I don't know if that's to her or baby. Future episode. Reginald Gray. This is my podcast, Waxing Prosaic. All things, everything. We'll get to that. Here we go. Picture this. I live in Canada's Roswell, which means Canada's UFO capital. In the 60s, there was a UFO landing, apparently, in the ocean that was recorded by the RCMP. It's like our FBI. Okay, my house is only a few kilometers from it. I'm sitting in the backyard of an Airbnb with a friend of mine visiting from Toronto when the most brilliant ruby red light you could imagine, a perfect sphere, coming off of it, 2 tails of orbs. These ones are bright white. It was ineffably luminous, pure phantasmagoria. But the weird thing was the way it lit up the surrounding area. Despite how bright it was, it didn't light it up as bright as it should. It was unbelievable, and I was just in awe, in wow. And as soon as I kind of got my bearings to really take it in, poof, just turned into black smoke. Was it a flare? Was it a UFO? Was I high? Maybe just a little tiny bit. Was it God? Did it happen at all? Did I make it up since then? Was this a memory that I wanted? Are memories even real? Are our past days real? Or do we only exist in this present moment and the back is this projection catalog that we all agree on? Some kind of learning program of sorts. I don't know. I'm glad I got the story, but did it even happen? So these are the kind of chaotic life situations of mine that we're going to unpack. And I'm lucky. This is a cathartic process, narrative therapy. Thank you for letting me kind of lay things out and get a grasp on things. But also I hope that y'all at home watching get something out of this too. Maybe you hear something that I say that resonates and makes you feel so not alone. That's my ultimate goal. You're not alone. Even if you have a crazy life as well, there are other people out there. Quick little disclaimer, everything said, my opinions, my takes, all me, nobody else. Not my family, not where I work, not where I go to school. Nobody, me. Okay, so like, this could get triggering. I know that's a thing we say now. This is controversial at times. In this video, I do speak about ideation, as well as some trippy psychedelic stuff. I know if I came across this video while I was vulnerable and susceptible, and arguably still to this day, I would appreciate a warning. Because those are the kind of things, hearing other people's experiences and those synapses firing and connecting them to mine, those can set me off. But hey, if you got beef, reach out, talk to me. It's all about discourse. There's room for echoes as well. You want to hit me up with a high five that we agree? I'm your guy. But hey, this world needs more discourse. It's so polarized. We need to start bringing people together, all right? This is a unity project. Not to make people feel alone, unity. There is a structure to these podcasts, but it's better to show you than tell you. So stay tuned, and you will see as we progress through more episodes, things will get more familiar, and you'll get what we're going for here. So let's wax prosaically. Instead of waxing poetically, prosaic, which means it's the antonym. But I hope there's a little bit of poetry in there too, you know? I can be fancy, I can be cultured. Look at me. Okay, don't answer it. Maybe not. Like a superhero movie, we have to have the origin story. My Wolverine claws. Don't get mad about it, Disney. Come on. I tattooed them on my hands. Let me show them. Quick little side note, because, I think I'm entitled to just get some hot takes out there just to get off my chest. Superhero movies, if you had told 13-year-old me that there were going to be this many, pig and I don't watch them. It's oversaturation. Pull it back. They're all kind of the same. I'll still go out for Wolverine. Deadpool's cool too. Also Canadian superhero, represent. But, take it down a couple down. That's just clearly I'm in the minority. Clearly, I am the minority. People love them. Then you're entitled to them. So I'm going to give my life story, and each of these chapters are going to be teased out into longer episodes later. So this is my way of previewing the series to come. Okay? So just anything that you hear and you like, stay tuned to the podcast because we're going to extrapolate on all of them. Wow, this is a cool kind of diagram I got going here. Maybe I can digitally put something in here. All right, first we're going to start with some psychology stuff here. Erik Erikson. Hilarious name, first of all. That's like me being called Reggie Reggieson. That's ridiculous. Actually, maybe I should change my name again. No, we're good. Anyways, he came out with this theory that our life goes in stages, 8 different stages. But the way the stages work is that there are 2 outcomes, positive and the negative. One of them in adolescence is identity versus confusion. I'm learning psychology right now. And when I reached this theory, it kind of broke my heart because I look back at my life previous, I'm now middle-aged, so I'm in the penultimate stage. And when I looked back at the previous 6, I realized that I was always on the end of every stage. Autonomy, good. Shame, negative. And then you get into initiative, positive. Guilt, negative. So here's a story from my childhood that sounds so ridiculously benign. But later in therapy, it was an absolute banger. And it shows these 2 negative sides. When I was a kid, my sister's boyfriend at the time bought me a Batman figurine. Super exciting. He doesn't like Batman. And I looked him in the eye and I said, I already got this one. That's kind of the end of the story, but that's what, in terms of interaction, the important part of the story was that I ran up to my room afterwards and bawled my eyes out for hours and thought about this for, how old am I now? 40. I don't know how old I was at the time, probably around 5 or 6. And I still think about it. That's shame and guilt. I felt bad that I said something to him after he did this really nice thing for me. And I felt shame like I did something bad. If I had come out on the positive side of the Erikson stages, I still may have responded to him the same way, but I wouldn't have been affected so deeply by this. I felt like talking about it in therapy 30 years later. I couldn't figure out why, but it was this major impact in my life. So my childhood was difficult. I felt very lost, despite having an excellent living situation, parents who loved me, 2 sisters who loved me, an awesome home, pets, animals. I never really felt at home. And a very easy piece of evidence for this was that I always went over to other people's houses to play. Y'all know who you're out there. Thank you for the love and support. I rarely had people over to mine. For the parents out there, I want you to take note of this. If you're seeing this from your kids, it might be worth probing and making sure that they feel like they have a home. As abstract as that is for a kid, I was clearly chasing that through my friends. My dad was an avid outdoorsman, loved being outside, camping, the whole nine. I was a dud. I just wanted to stay inside and play video games all day, every day. So the one thing that I chose to be the crux of my not wanting to go outside were bees. Bees were my number one phobia, and for absolutely no reason. I'd never been stung. I mean, there's an evolutionary kind of skew to it, where bees, I think, are wired into us to be a little bit like, they pack a punch. Maybe generationally, that has been handed down our lineage, but bees were the thing that I picked on, which is projection. I was projecting my fear of maybe letting my father down. I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to bond out in the wilderness. I projected that onto bees. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. Every single time my parents would be like, Matthew, let's go outside. My birth name is Matthew, by the way. Bees. I don't like the bees. It became a joke within our family. And then the funny thing is, years later, you grow up, you get stung. It's not that bad. I got stung right in the eye once, playing soccer when I was an adolescent. I remember getting stung on my foot. What a metaphor, right? I built up this thing subconsciously. Kids are brilliant. Kids are brilliant, even if they don't know they are. So creative. I was so creative to pin this entire thing on bees to give me an out, when really I didn't want to participate, likely because I didn't want to let my father down. I thought I was less than, and bees were my way out. Kids are smart, very creative. Honestly, parents out there, watch out for this. If you got a kid who has an unexplained phobia, or even if it is evolutionarily built into us as humans, something to keep an eye on. And an excellent way to guide them through it is extremely careful, loving exposure therapy, where we hold them to observe the bees and remind them that I got your back. Tell me what the bee incites in you. Oh, there it goes. It's flying around. But don't worry. I'll step in front. I'll take the bullet. It's a quick way out of it. We'll get into that deeper. Also, traumatic event can lead to a phobia, but also something to keep in mind are vicarious transferences of phobias, something my wife and I have been talking about because of her immense fear of spiders. We don't want our daughter to see her. Freaking out like that, yeah. Man, as you'll hear later, my father did end up passing when I was 18. And I look back, my heart's broken that I missed out on that. Not even for the experiences, but I missed out on a part of development. Growing up, children often will go toward their mother for nurturing and go toward their father for risk-taking and excitable play. And my dad wanted to do that with me. He wanted to go camping. And I chickened out. For good reasons, of course. Deep down, things that needed to be worked on. And it was a mountain later in life that I had to climb up. And I mourn and grieve for that child. I do. I feel for him. But we made it through. Spoiler. That's a spoiler. Don't, maybe cut that. Puberty was a hell of a thing. That's when I became, now I'm using air quotes, because I never really idealized it beyond the idea of I don't want to exist, I don't want to be in this. That's just how I labeled it. Once I started to understand what that was and how I was feeling, now as an adult looking back, having done some exploring on the subject, I think it was more accurately described as existential angst. And to say, oh, it was just a phase, a puberty phase. Well, that phase lasted till I was 32. To the extent that it was, I don't want to be here. Why am I here? What is this? I say 32, but it very much still exists today. I'm just more well-adjusted. And at 32 was when it kind of went away on a dangerous level. I remember telling my therapist that asking me if I had ever had any idealization. I was like, well, no, but I never really wanted to exist. So you put the two together, and what a scary way to exist, to be aching and hurting inside from such a young age and not being able to express it. And now that I think of just how crazy this existence is in general, I couple those things together and I really look at myself as a child and I wonder about others going into adolescence, what they're wrestling inside if they're not as communicative. That's a tough one. It scares the heck out of me because how are you even supposed to be able to explain that stuff? Even at 40, with being educated and life experience, I still can't grasp and explain what it is to exist, let alone to be hurting. Spit on myself. Let alone hurting inside and trying to explain that. So puberty was hell of a drug. I remember my mom telling me I spent a lot of time alone in my room. I don't really remember it, and how much of that is just blocking it out for safety's sake. That must have been difficult. My heart goes out to him. So this is where we sublimate. Sublimation. Where you take really negative feelings and problems that you have and you put them out into the world in activities that are acceptable. So this is where I started playing sports to get all this energy out and angst. Was a goalie in hockey, I'm Canadian. It was a rite of passage. One must do that. And dreams of going to the NHL. Delusions of grandeur. I was young, but it's a little delusional. Anyways, more on that later. But the big thing was kind of this. This is where this started. The idea of performing, putting myself out there. I was way more interested in being funny in high school. I did get the class clown. I campaigned for it. You shouldn't have to campaign for class clown. It should just be. Anyways, I should have just let it come naturally. It would have been a better achievement. I'm sorry, Ben, if I stole that one from you. I forget who the third person was. Doesn't matter. My life centered around performing. At the time, my father was a photographer, filmmaker. He had a digital camera. My sister had a Macintosh computer, and back then, very rare, artists only. God, has that changed? And their stock prices show it. And therefore, I was the guy who, at my high school, people brought me their film projects, and I put them together, or shot them too, which was very cool. And I thought to myself, is there a career in this? And at the time, the Trailer Park Boys had just came out, and I looked at that show, and I thought I want to do that. So despite having absolutely no grades to speak of, it was bad, I applied to a bunch of film schools on a Hail Mary. The one thing I needed was a 70 in English, and I was not doing well. So I went to my teacher, who was an awesome human being, very supportive, and I begged her to let me do something other than writing something. And she agreed to let me do a interpretive dance with a very dear friend of mine, who's a dear friend to this day. And we did an interpretive dance to Oedipus Rex, where he played Oedipus, and then I played every other role. Or was it the other way around? I actually don't remember. We'll go to the tape on this one. We're going to cut to it anyways. B-roll, here it is. I look good in spandex. Just saying. Maybe I got some on down here. You don't even know. Anyways, we finished. We got really great marks. After some begging and politicking, and I got my English mark to where it almost needed to be, and I got rejected from every film school. Except for one. I ended up getting into Sheridan College, which is one of the better film schools in Canada, but at a loss. I only got in because my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and given 3 months with chemo, 6 months without. Other way around. Other way around. Yeah. It made me be able to bypass all of my exams. And he actually was a former, not only student, he was actually a former professor there. This is where he met my mom. It's not scandalous. She's 3 years younger. Mind out of the gutter. Into entertaining, which is what this is supposed to be. And the school helped me out. And in the end, on his deathbed, I got to show him my letter of acceptance. His passing was what got to propel me into the next stage of life. He was an amazing man. He was so funny and brilliant. And the two go part and parcel. I often say one can be smart without being funny, but one cannot be funny without being smart. And my dad was the perfect example of that. And despite his very high intellect, he decided to go into the arts, and he wanted to be a photographer and a filmmaker. There's a whole story behind that. It'll be an episode I'm so excited for. Anyways, pilot, aerial photography, and photography back in the day when it was like film, like darkroom film, and Photoshop were like scalpels with glue. And he did work with some really gross chemicals, and we do wonder if that contributed to his cancer. We'll never know, but just something I always felt like a bit of a loose end. He was an amazing guy, and like I said, I'm excited for that episode because there's really a lot to say about him, and just to be able to share his legacy. And I wish he could see what I went into. So often I tell my mom, I wish he could just see drones. He was a pilot, so he would be out with a drone every day making drone films. So whenever I take mine up, I'm always like, what's up, Pa? Before we get into film school, my dad's passing also was my first ever tattoo. No, not this. Okay. The Shooter, that was his company and his logo for his photography company. And yeah, an interesting thing when I think of because obviously what I'm getting at is I'm pretty, kind of covered. And on that note, remember when I questioned time earlier and I was like, do we only exist in this moment? Is the rest of our days prior just a roadmap? Well, I have a literal roadmap of all my adventures all over me. So it's a good thing, right? I'm memento guy over here. I'm Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce. And that was a big thing in therapy and people being concerned for me. I got the first tattoo. Obviously, a lot of people for dealing with grieving will get tattooed with the person who had passed, something in memory, one of those, for that person. And clearly that was a part of it. But also I was an 18-year-old male who's now the head of the house, growing up way too fast. And even though I would refuse to admit it at the time, a bit of a rite of passage moment. And I think it really empowered me and made me feel more adult. We're going to do an episode on rites of passage, but it just kind of struck me of how important they are in our culture, and that even subconsciously I may have been looking for one. Not that it was bestowed upon me. It was something that I felt to move me into adulthood, which is funny to say because anyone who knows me knows, am I in it yet? Probably, but I need to start dressing age appropriate in this Bert and Ernie hair, more Bert than Ernie. But tattoos, just to very briefly talk about them, are a bit of an interesting paradox for me, because one side of it is this need to be seen, which is very fed by that, where I have social identity through my tattoos. He's the tattooed guy. Although they're starting to get way more popular. I see cops with them now. Back in my day, But at the same time, for me, they're social armor. So social identity would be people coming up to me and like, oh, I want to talk about your tattoos. But at the same time, I like to think of myself as more intimidating. And it's social armor. Leave me alone. Really interesting dichotomy, and just something that I've explored intellectually. I've explored it in therapy, continue to explore it. There was an urge, need, it's gone. But now I look at my body and I'm like, whoa, what? I blinked and my skin is. But then at the same time, I don't see them. Again, paradox. This is just me. Whew. Getting rid of them would really hurt. Just, can you imagine? So I'm never going to be prime minister. Sorry, everyone, your loss. Your loss. Film school was unbelievable. That was the good part, if you could call it good, of my dad's passing right at the end of high school, was that my life transitioned into something completely different, which for the grieving process, I mean, there's something to be said about sitting and experiencing and feeling. But at that age, given my life experience at the time and what I was going through, arguably it was actually advantageous for me to move on to a new section of life and going into a whole new school, a new group of friends to be added to the existing one, and a whole new discipline of focusing in on filmmaking and entertaining, and something I was really passionate about. So film school went really well because, you know, this is a kid who was a bit of a failure in high school. But I did okay in film school because it was something I'm interested in. The people were one of the best parts of it. And when I think about film school, it's so true. You don't need an education in film. They don't give a flying what education you have. If you are creative and you can make something awesome and you can make money, no one checks your but the key to film school is the networking and the opportunities. So on that note, the most memorable day of film school was actually the first day. I went into visual storytelling class. Everybody's excited and eager. I'm going to be a filmmaker. And we sat down and the instructor said, okay, who here wants to be a director? And naturally, every single person in the class, 100%, hands up, hands up. To which he replied, you're in the wrong program. And we all went, huh? And he said, you should be in psychology if you want to be a director. And then he carried on. And we were all kind of looking at like, what? We're paying money. We're here. We're excited to get into a prestigious film. And we're in the wrong one. It was an interesting Easter egg later in life. As I said, you didn't need to really go to film school, but it was about the opportunities. And at the end of film school, we got to do internships. I am so bad at selling myself. Like, it's still to this day. Tattoos. I'm a peacock. People come to me. So everybody had to get their own hustle, get their own internship. And the last day of being placed, the placement instructor came up to me and said, Matthew, again, birth name, Matthew, do you have an internship yet? No. She said, okay, you're coming with me. We're placing you with one of the teachers. Like, what a bummer. My internship was going to be with one of my instructors who were awesome human beings. Don't get it twisted. But like, I'm supposed to like expand and stuff. And I went into her office, sat down in the chair, phone rang. I'm looking at him. He'll be there. There's a phone. I was on the set of a real broadcast television show. It was called Rent-A-Goalie on Showcase. Now, remember I had mentioned Trailer Park Boys earlier. This show was a lead-in to Trailer Park Boys, my heroes. And it was funny because my resume that I made was like a test resume. And I put my goal is to be working on the Trailer Park Boys. And hi, I'm applying to Trailer Park Boys. I never changed it and just submitted it because I'm not great at paperwork. In film, that's what producers are for. And I'm not good at that. Anyways, they gave me the job anyway. And it was a life transition into a whole new world, the real world-ish. I say ish because this was a television show, but it was a family. I went into a show that from the top on down, film is a very hierarchical medium. There has to be people in charge for things to get done, and there has to be people who are have their designated roles. But this show, and people had their specific roles, but my God, everyone was equal. So much love, even for a 20-year-old kid. And some of the crew members, I remember telling me, kid, don't get used to this. You're new to the film industry. It's not like this. Trust me. I was like, yeah, right, I'm 20 years old. I got all the time in the world. Everything's going to be like, no. 22 years later, I look back and I was like, that was special. That was special. The one thing that was hard about it was I remember this one crew member talking to me and saying, because I made like little behind the scenes featurettes. I'd interview actors and crew, and for the DVD back then, now it's web content, of course. But I had one of the crew members come up to me and say, hey, we're going to work for you one day. Whew. That is, I mean, first of all, thank you. That was so sweet. Thank you. That did not end up happening. The praise paradox. Young people have a shaky identity, likely more than adults. I mean, in terms of the Erikson stages thing, identity comes in adolescence. So technically I was getting into young adulthood. So mine ought to have been a little more stable, alas. But when it came to people over top of me, comments like that were really detrimental because of the praise paradox, where, like a hit from a drug, you tell a young person who has a shaky sense of self and identity something with such gravitas, and maybe to them it wasn't. It's like, but that's a big thing to say. When I'm 20 years old, I'm looking at this 40-something telling me this. Wow. It's a hit in the moment. I'm like, whoop, I'm going to be, I'm doing pretty damn good. But in the long term, we start to set up very stringent expectations on ourselves. And if you're ill-equipped for those, you start to shy away, as we'll see later in my story. So that was very jarring. And that's just one example of something that happened multiple times. That being said, my main mentors, the showrunners, were nothing but incredible and generous. And the thing that was so key that they did, that counteracts the praise paradox, not counteracts, but it's a more advantageous way of speaking to a mentee, is to praise their hard work. If you praise a young person for working their buns off, there's nothing but good that's going to come from that, because you're not praising the work that they did, as in the product that they made. Moderate praise, great, and it should happen. We should acknowledge the things that are made by a younger person. But the most important thing to praise is hard work, because with an emphasis on that, there's more of a chance they're going to try, and they're going to fail, and they're not going to tie their self-worth to it. The showrunners on that show, family. One of them was at my wedding. Incredible human beings. I still have a working relationship with them to this day. So lucky. And with them, I went into doing more documentary series, including, at first I did this really cool band documentary series. We traveled all over North America. Being a documentary is a smaller crew, so a lot more responsibility. Man, there was this one anecdote where I worked with one of my favorite bands of all time who made, to this day, well, this is where it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, which means my heart says one thing, my brain says another, and I get a bit of a, because of it, my favorite album, one of them of all time. I was there for the recording of it in Toronto and New York. It was so exciting. But man, that band wasn't in the best mood, and it was a difficult shoot. And when I put those two things together, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. It can still be one of my favorite albums of all time, and they can still have treated me kind of poorly. But this is interesting where the way our brains work, I have two of these different synapses connected where I'm like, love this band. But then over here, I'm like, they didn't treat me that great. And then, through the corpus callosum, those two kind of meet and go. Anyways, it was a wicked experience. And I got to work very closely with directors who were in my film school textbooks. And I got to work with some bands who I grew up idolizing. I remember driving to one shoot with a lead singer of one of the bands that I idolized as a kid. And we were in traffic, anybody who's been in Southern Ontario traffic, Toronto to Hamilton, rush hour. So we had like 2 hours to just sit, and I was just asking questions. So what happened to this band member? How did this song come? What a life. It was so cool. And then we transitioned from that documentary series into one about filmmakers making documentaries about and with other filmmakers. And that was a thrill of a lifetime. I'm in my mid-20s. We spent 2 months in Hollywood, including a stint where we stayed in the Hollywood Hills with one of the actors from Battlestar Galactica. It was so cool. I ended up actually getting to direct one of the episodes that I pitched. It was an idea that I had, and it was about creating my own superhero. It was, maybe is, my filmmaking mountaintop moment. It definitely felt like it at the time. I got to co-direct it with a guy who was at my wedding, who's the showrunner from Rent-A-Goalie. And it was shot by one of my high school best friends, was the director of photography. We shot in Vancouver. We shot in New York. We shot in Toronto. Met some of my heroes, worked with some of my heroes. The project was a success all around, and that specific episode ended up getting nominated for a Canadian Oscar. I got nominated for a CSA, a Canadian Screen Award, Best Director in a Nonfiction Television Series. And wow, I look back on that and I can't believe it happened. And after it did happen, I thought to myself, this is it. And this is where that kind of self-sabotage comes back from the Rent-A-Goalie, the praise paradox. Instead of me jumping on this momentum and being like, yo, I'm worthy, I'm awesome, I'm gonna to the top, I was like, you know what? This all got kind of handed to me and I'm just gonna kind of recede into the ether. There were some things that I tried to do, but it was that tattoo thing where I'm a peacock. I made this episode of television, got nominated for the highest honor in the land. People are going to come to me, right? Right? No one came to me. None. So self-sabotaging in a way where I just, instead of being ferocious and going after it, I receded and I waited and they never came. Still waiting. HBO Canada, you want to? I could make something for. I've been not for. No. Didn't think so. I'd be cool to do a Netflix show or something. Anyways, I'm qualified. Just never had the killer instinct. From there, I started working on some corporate gigs through that company, and including the NHLPA, which was so cool. I loved hockey. Remember I told you I wanted to play hockey, be a hockey goalie guy. Who thought, I said I was going to be in the NHL. Delusions of grandeur, or were they? Because in a roundabout way, I got to play with NHLers, which was cool. There was one day that we did a shoot at some cool arena, and afterwards they thought, hey, let's just play some pickup hockey with who's here. And they said, we don't have a goalie. Reggie, you're a goalie, aren't you? I was like, yeah. Here's some equipment. You want to play? I went out there, and one of the players, one of my favorites, Eric Lindros, was out there. And I remember looking and being like, I am going to save a shot from Eric Lindros. Look out, world. Maybe I should have been on the Avalanche backing up Patrick Waugh. And Eric Lindros scored 10 times. He took 10 shots, he scored 10 times. So I played with Eric Lindros. I never got to stop Eric Lindros. So I probably, I put in my place. It was a fun gig, even when Nate McKinnon, big hockey player, and I'm in Nova Scotia right now, big Nova Scotia kid, one of the biggest hockey players in the world right now. I almost got kicked out of the New Jersey Devils arena during the draft where Nate McKinnon was drafted number 1. I was on the floor in some thing with rights and exclusive rights for TSN, which is the sports network here in Canada. And I got out there with my camera because the security guy didn't know where I was supposed to go. I was right there with Patrick Waugh, my absolute favorite hockey player of all time, Joe Sakic. And I'm sitting there like, yo, this is awesome. And then security, who did know I wasn't supposed to be there, quite literally yanked me out of there and was like, you almost cost us an endless amount of money and you can't fit the bill. So you're gone. Producer talked them out of it. Anyways, that was cool. Just a little. There's been a theme, though, growing, right? I got to meet all my heroes. Anyways, it's still coming. The heroes are still coming. At this point, I got tattooed at Tattoo Rock Parlor, which was a bar in Toronto where they had tattoos in a bar. It was quarantined off, so it wasn't getting dirty. Anyways, Dennis Rodman hosted a party there. I got this 7, which I got to show to him, and he looked at me and he said, what's the 7 mean? To which I said, 7 rebounding titles in the Crown. The Crown has 5 points for your 5 NBA champions. Oh. Turn and walk away. Meet some of your heroes. Some of them have been great, but that one wasn't the best. But hey, Rodman, I'll go to blows with anyone. One of the best professional athletes of all time. Late bloomer. Hardest working person. 6'8", he's going to rebounds from 7-footers. At that rate, at the rate that he... Anyways, that's going to be a whole episode, right? We're just talking about Dennis Rodman. The worm. My man. Leading out of the corporate stuff, I ended up getting an offer to work full-time in advertising. So now I'm like kind of, performing and entertainment's my thing. But I started to kind of taper off into, there's not a ton of money. I mean, Canada, there's not a ton of money here. And I wasn't chasing it like I should have been to get this money. So now I'm kind of tapering off. And I'm getting into advertising where there's a ton of money. My favorite advertising story was my very first day in advertising was also the first day of some of the creative, the key creative. I see that's the thing. As soon as you start to get into corporate stuff or things that have I don't understand the hierarchy of that. There's executive, I get the film side of it, but anyways, some of the head honchos of creative, the big guys were going for this big account and they needed somebody to edit their pitch. I was the new guy. I'm like, yo, bring it on. So they give me a script. It just had the lines of dialogue. And they said, we want voiceover for each of these. Cool. ACTRA, which is the actors union here, hired 10 performers, child actors, which need also a liaison and they need the whole thing. 10 of them to come in and read each line, just one line. Kid came in, read one line, $1,000 a pop, $1,000. 10 grand altogether then by my calculations. Did I mention in university right now? Sat the executives down to watch my edit. No. After the first line was that no. And they said, we don't want voiceover. We want supers instead. Supers are the titles on screen. Okay. I can put supers instead. Which is funny because supers cost $0. I put them on the thing in no time, with cost nothing. 10 grand, lit up in flames. I did the next edit. This is, okay, so the company it's for is Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, which is a sick children's hospital. It's one of the worst, no offense, Sick Kids, amazing, the things that you do, 10, 11, 12, 13, infinity out of 10. You don't name the power of suggestion. It should be called healthy kids. Getting kids healthy. Guitar, think of a guitar. You think of a guitar. The power of to call it sick kids is not. Anyways, that's just I'm not a big marketing exec, clearly. So, because what happened was I did a video for knowing that it was for sick kids, and I made it, what do you think about tugging at heartstrings, kids who are sick being loved and taken care of. They looked at it and they said, "You're fired. Gonzo, you're off the job." Not out of the company, but you're off the job. Okay. So then somebody else took it. Awesome dude. And he cut it into this thing that was Bombs Over Baghdad by Outkast. Fast. That's not the actual tune, but like similar. And the images are like kids fighting, kicking butt, and these awesome dudes, and like everybody's strong. And I saw the edit and I was like, okay, yeah, hey, that's wild. That ad campaign went on to this day. It's still running. This is 9 years ago, and it wins award after award after award. I didn't have the best direction in my defense. We got to look at all angles of things here. But, all the power to them. They knew what the heck they were doing. But hey, what can you do? I'm just proud. I'm proud that I worked on the first ever first pitch document of that Sick Kids campaign, which is awesome. Awesome. And I feel bad what I said about Sick Kids, but it's true. It's true. Okay, so I'm tapering out of the film industry, and I'm just going to jump ahead very quick and go back. I'm now middle age, and one thing that happens in middle age is a midlife crisis. I have this horrid feeling that I didn't do enough. Well, I did. I ended. Anyways, we'll get to that. But this is just a teaser. I was very recently feeling that I did not do enough. And that's one thing that happens when some of our later stages of life, specifically the penultimate, the one I'm in, which is generativity versus stagnation, to go back to Erik Erikson. And when you're in that stage, you're starting to reflect and you're starting to see what you've contributed and the ways that you have lived now that you have a bit of a story that has been told. And when I look back on this, as we're doing right now, I look at this tapering down. Started off with a bang, started to get into other things for other reasons. And I look at that momentum that I had off the top and I feel like I just didn't. And I could have. And that's been a hard thing to get over. I remember confiding in a friend of mine that was a little older, a little further down the road, a very talented person. And I was wondering if I could find some solace in him just kind of being like, hey, me too. Chum. Solidarity. Instead, he said, yeah, Reggie Gray. He could have been a contender. Whatever happened to that kid? It was funny, and I honestly still think of it to this day. And it's true. As silly as kind of the Rocky manager voice, I guess that is, it really framed it in an interesting way and made me take myself a little less seriously. But in no way cured me, because I still think about it. But we'll get to that. Back into the story. At this point in my late 20s, emotionally, I'm starting to tell that there's something different and wrong about me. I'm still feeling that existential dread, which I did categorize as not wanting to exist, not wanting to be on. My favorite way to put it was I didn't sign up for this. Meanwhile, awful relationships and often being diagnosed from people who have no jurisdiction to do so, of every personality disorder you could possibly imagine. And anyone out there being diagnosed by people who don't truly have the right to do so, I'm sorry. And I hear you. And that hurts, for me, hurt more than I could possibly tell you. Now, those people diagnosing you have every right to share their concern, and they have every right to show maybe some of the research that they've done and for you to be cognizant of some of the things that they've learned. And they may even be onto something. However, they don't have a right to label you in those ways. That takes a professional. And as somebody who was labeled that way, and they actually, in the defense again of the people who were labeling me, they had a point. They had a point. But anyways, at this point, I knew something was wrong with me. I knew therapy existed, but didn't want to go for two reasons. One, I didn't want to be labeled. That label scared the hell out of me, to have somebody with an actual degree on the wall to, boom, you're this label. The stigmatization of that was really scary. And then on top of that, I did not want to be medicated. That scared the hell out of me, deeper than I could ever tell you. A label I feel like I could have worked through. Medication for those kinds of things, for me, scares me. So I knew something was wrong. I started into bibliotherapy, which is real. I self-helped the out of it to try to figure out what was wrong with me, looking at Dr. Phil and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. I tried to get into all these things to try to find what was going on inside of me. Who was this person? What was this thing? What was this feeling of not wanting to exist? It was scary and lonely. And that guilt and shame from when I was a kid with the Batman toy, that was keeping me from even talking to anyone else. Felt like I was doing something wrong. Felt that I was broken. I was guilty. But we keep pressing on. So at that point, I entered a relationship, and things were going well in the, success of work department. She was very successful as well. So we had an apartment in Toronto. We had a house out in the country, my first house I bought in Picton, the county in Ontario. It was cool as shit. Damn, I still think about the county. Anyways, and we also bought a trailer. A travel trailer, 1970, 7 by 10, 70 square feet travel trailer. Now, remember, I had never been outdoors. So we are seeing a little bit of evolution here. I never went outdoors with my dad, super outdoorsman, but this partner that I was with, her dream was to have a trailer. So we got a trailer, and I gotta admit, I rather liked it. It was fun. It was fun to go out, and you got your glorified tent. The thing had no insulation, and you got to travel and see the world. And we went to Tennessee and New Orleans, and it was what an interesting way to do things. And this is maybe at the start of road life thing was starting to catch on. I was like, oh, kind of cool. Anyways, this relationship was going very poorly, and I shoulder a very lot of that blame. And one of the stipulations to continue the relationship at the time was to go to therapy. I had to commit and go to therapy to work through all these things. So finally I did. I found this mind-blowing psychologist, and he was very against medication. And he was very for working through this and figuring out a true, real diagnosis using the DSM, which is the Bible in psychology for diagnoses, for psychiatric disorders. And that was a heck of a process. 5 years I was in that therapist's office, and this will be a whole, not even an episode, this will be a series. Long story short, he said, you do not. I have the actual power to say so. You do not have borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. You have guilt. You have shame. You have no identity. Now think of how paradoxical that is on the outside. On the outside. Covered in tattoos. I wear fun clothes. What up, what up? But on the inside, nothing. On the outside, blatant identity, overcompensating identity. But on the inside, empty. Nothing. No morals, no values, no beliefs, no me. On the outside, all this stuff. So that was starting to take shape. I intellectually could understand him, what he was saying to me. Emotionally, the therapy ended before we really got to work on the emotional stuff. At that time, and during that, the relationship that I was in ended, and I had a poor habit of, at the end of a relationship, of just pure acquiescence. I would just say, you know what? You take everything. I'm good. I'm going to start from scratch, which later in life became something that the idea of starting over. Whew. So anyways, the partner bought me out of the house for what I put into it. All good, even Steven. And I took the trailer. But before moving on completely into the next chapter, I do want to give an honest, sincere thank you to that person. I put you through hell and back, and I'm sorry. What you did for me, sending me out, A, into therapy, B, out into the road, words cannot come close. Heartfelt thank you. And I hope you found everything in life that you could possibly want. Thank you. This is it, my trailer. I lived in my little trailer named Franny after my grandmother. All of a sudden, for the summer, I'm living in the trailer in Toronto, working in Toronto. There's a trailer park north of the city, which is pretty great. And that was a heck of a trip because I never really planned to do the nomadic thing. I didn't even like being outside, but all of a sudden it was kind of, I didn't know where to live. And it gets cold in Canada. So I was like, I guess I'm going to go live on the road. I guess I'm doing this thing. So I became Reggie from the road, a nomad covered in tattoos, nowhere to be, nothing to do, dressed all weird and exciting to go on the road, but also instead of truly building an identity, I was piling onto the mask. I was like, before going on the road, my mask was pretty thick. Probably over this camera. But it just got thicker and thicker and thicker. But hey, it was fun, which lasted 5 years. I lived in a glorified tent, a 7x10, 70 square foot box that I took all over North America, every single corner, down to Florida, loved Texas, across over to, was in the Southwest a lot, went as high as the Yukon. Excuse my burp. It's better. I'm gonna have a baby soon. I gotta know how it feels when they, all the way up to the Yukon. Magical. What an experience. I still can't believe that was me, that I did that. That was real. And it was funny because so many people were like, I'm living vicariously through you. And I'd be like, you're damn right you are. Because this is awesome. I didn't have this one on the bingo card. And people would ask me, how do I do this? And my answer was pathetic because a lot of people have mood boards and they follow nomadic influencers and like, I want to do that. I just kind of fell into it in a lot of ways, and it was wicked. And my two big tips for nomadic people, number one, baby food. Those baby food packets, no preservatives. You can get organic, BPA-free, servings of vegetables that keep $1 usually. I mean, that matters where, but $1 for a serving of organic vegetables. Baby everything, by the way, sunscreen, moisturizers, even big evil corporations love babies. Who doesn't love about to have my baby? I love babies. The other thing is just to keep in mind, all those influencers that you see, they stink. That was the one thing I just thought was funny, was like people idealize these van life influencers and they're living a cool life. Don't get it twisted, but they smell bad. Maybe I'm, just kind of projecting again, but okay. Yeah, maybe I'm just throwing my stink onto them, but I guarantee their showers are few and far between. Seriously. So in the heart of therapy, the one big thing though that did come out was that loss at 32, that loss of that existential dread. I flat out threw a party where my absolute closest friends came. I rented a cottage in God's country, which is the Muskokas here in Canada, Ontario. I'm in Nova Scotia, in Ontario. And all my bestest friends came, and it was to celebrate me not wanting to die anymore, me not wanting to not exist. I mean, that changed as well, but that was one of the best days. I can think that was really magical. But the biggest thing that came from therapy, now that I look back where I'm at, is I used to sit across from this therapist, look at the degrees on his wall and, stoic, brilliant. And I'd look at him and think, I could never do that. This is so cool what he's doing. This cerebral, therapeutic, deeply intelligent process, intuitive, empathetic. I was like, I could never do that on those more surface or those deeper levels, but even on the surface level of I'm in my 30s. I'm not going back to school. I'm not smart enough. My high school grades, I'm not smart enough to go get a doctorate and do this. And then where do I find the time? Where do I find the money? But I looked at that guy and I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that. It's just impossible. Nothing's impossible. Stay tuned. This is where there's a commercial break. Sell you some Huggies or Pampers or deodorant or a fleshlight, depending on what, maybe it's late night. Adult Swim, does that exist still? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of urination looks like this. I'm not only sponsored, I actually love the product. So, bonus points for anybody who's watching this and is starting to see Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey. The very simple way of putting it. Star Wars, A New Hope. That is the quintessential retelling of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I'm now venturing out away from home, leaving Southern Ontario to find on great adventure, right? Yeah, pretty wild. This is where there's a hint of, is this a simulation? As this stuff starts to kind of fall into, keep going. Just get back. Okay, now we're back into working in advertising during the summers, winters in the States, making a ton of money. And I can brag about that now because now I'm not. So it's okay. If it's in the past, then you can brag a little bit. But I was like freedom in my early 30s, like Freedom 32, rocking around the southern states during the winter. No, nothing to do. Advertising for me personally was very draining. I could only do it for, a very short period of time because you can only sell so many Big Macs until you're like, man, this is a little soul-sucking. Whereas the film industry was incredibly fulfilling, but it's not as lucrative for me, for other people, of course. But then advertising was incredibly lucrative, but not fulfilling. So having that time off was great. But the one thing that I needed to do to kind of feed my soul was to make films that mattered to me. So when I had the house in the county, my goal was to make sweet, short films about some of the residents, just some of the regular townspeople, make a cute little film about them. So I'm making advertising, making money, and I'm making my cute little films on the end. When that relationship ended and I lost the house in the county and I'm on the road, I'm like, okay, so why don't I pivot? Why don't I still do my documentary series, but I do them about people on the road? That's what I'll do. So I got on the road, got down into the States, and I was like, okay, here we go. I was in North Carolina. I walked down the trailer park, Confederate flags everywhere. How am I going to do this? A man rode by on his bike. He said, because I don't make the first move, love your trailer. So thank you. Then we got to talking. I said, can I make a video about you? He's like, sure. So I made my first short film. Michael Farrington, the man is a wizard. Watch the documentary piece. It's on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes. Mind-blowingly beautiful human being. He and I go our separate ways. He runs into this family down in Florida called North Haven. They're on the road. They gave up their home in Minnesota. They're on the road going to mass trauma events to offer free counseling, help people, refuge for the broken. They met up in Florida, and Michael was telling North Haven about their adventures with Reggie. And they said, does he need us? And Michael said, no, not yet. Whew. Some goosebumps there. Whew. Anyways, I got in touch with North Haven through Michael, and I said, hey, I'd love to make a documentary about you. Made our documentary. It was all great. Let's put North Haven aside for a bit. Okay? Family. Love them. So then, COVID. Everybody knows COVID. I was down in Los Angeles when it was like serious hotspot. Like it was going down in LA. So then I moved to Vegas as if that was going to be any better. Vegas was empty. That was a trip just to see that. What a cool experience. Once in a lifetime, I hope. And I thought to myself, I'm getting off the road because something tells me I'm not coming back to the States for a long, long time. So I got back to Canada, got to my mom's to quarantine, and that summer I spent it renovating a friend's house up in Barrie, Ontario. Meanwhile, I was like, okay, my life goal, which I kind of got, I had my country home in Picton for a very short period of time, but my life goal was to have a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, Quebec. I don't speak any French. Non parle français. I wish I did. I genuinely wish I did. I wish I paid attention in school when it was free lessons, but see, I get like a regret about the past. Anyways, I thought it was a bad idea during COVID because if I wound up in a hospital, I'm not going to be able to get any help. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to New Brunswick, which is the province beside Quebec, because I wanted to open an Airbnb once COVID cleared up. And I thought with New Brunswick, I could draw from Nova Scotia, I could draw from Maine, I could draw from Quebec, I could draw from Prince Edward Island. This is so smart. A friend of mine was like, hey, why don't you try Nova Scotia? My dear, dear friend from high school. I was like, I still want to be nomadic. I don't want to be on the edge of the earth. Tried 2 places in New Brunswick, both fell through. Checked the realtor in Nova Scotia. First one, Fort Nova. You can go on my YouTube and see some vlogs I've done, find all about Fort Nova, but holy, 127 acres, 1800s farmhouse, across the street from the ocean, like the list, oh, my neighbor's family, Bubba, Nanny Pam, the town, awesome, super small town, Nova Scotia. Couldn't be more on the edge of the earth, but it was so meant to be. It has such a rich history. It was the hospice for the area, so it's haunted by the best people, hard workers, the people who were born there and lived there. It was a post office for 100 years. It's just the coolest place. But for anybody following the Joseph Campbell thing, we're going into the cave. The adventure, fun, fun, fun. Now we're going into the cave. So I'm there. COVID's going on. I'm isolated like you wouldn't believe. I'm trying to make content similar when I was on the road, but it gets hard when you're just stuck in one place. Like, spoiler, being on the road is pretty great for content, right? Anyways, what I found very fulfilling was working on the house, learning renovation things. Remember, I was a guy who, these hands soaking in ivory water. I was a guy who sat on his computer, going back to even my dad's stuff, right? My dad worked with his hands. My dad was, my grandfather was an excellent carpenter, and my dad could work with his hands. My dad was an outdoorsman. I sat on my Nintendo, which, kind of blossomed out into sitting on my computer. And now that I had this house in the country, I could kind of, bear down and learn renovations and things like that. It was awesome. That was so fulfilling to me. And at the time, it was funny because I removed myself from filmmaking. And this was another mountaintop moment of sorts. I actually ended up getting my own television show. It was called Home at Last, featuring me and my neighbor. It was on a very small broadcaster, micro budget, an infinitesimal budget. I ended up going a lot out of pocket on that one. But it was a life goal to have my own TV show, and I technically did. And it was so exciting for my neighbor. He's such a big, awesome presence, and it was a thrill. That's a treasure and a keepsake. Anyways, but the scary part was the isolation, which for us humans, we are social creatures, and there are studies that suggest that isolation is worse for us than a pack of smokes a day, and I believe it. My mental health was flatlining. Now, I was getting into lumberjacking and renos and really getting in touch with this raw masculine energy that I'd never experienced before. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But on the emotional side, I was breaking down. And COVID didn't help because I'm so shocked that I can now admit this without being tarred and feathered. This will be an episode. What I went through emotionally, choosing not to be vaccinated. Social pressure of that from friends, family, everyone was scared. There is no anger. There is no, I was hurt because of my situation more than anything. But there were a lot of pressures from the people above. And we all know how things went down were not best handled. We were in a novel situation. But for somebody who wasn't vaccinated, especially in Canada, where it was 90% of the country got vaccinated, I was in the 10 percentile. I know a lot of you don't agree with me, especially in that time, but we are in a society of people who are oppressed and put down, who are getting a voice, which I think is terrific. I mean, the internet really decentralizes opinions. And I think now that we're coming out of COVID, where it isn't so scary, I think it's actually advantageous that 90% in Canada, but the majority regardless, I think it's important that they hear the stories of us in the minority and how we wrestled with being put on the bottom. And yeah, I'm a WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant product of that anyways. And just because I am those things doesn't mean in some regards of society that I can't be oppressed. And I experienced it. On the positive side, it gives me a lens to see how marginalized communities deal with life all the time. And my heart goes out to them. But my opinion is valid, and I think there are things to learn from us who were unvaccinated through COVID now that time has passed. So please, when that episode comes up, I beg that you listen. And I hope that stories like mine can be considered the next time something like this comes up. That's all I ask. Let's all get better together. moving on. So I couldn't afford therapy. I wasn't working very much. I was all alone. I didn't trust getting started with a new therapist in Nova Scotia. I wasn't really talking to people back home. I had a small community in rural Nova Scotia. So I thought to myself, mushrooms. I had a friend who was like, I do these therapeutically at times, and they really help me. I have a very strict rule. I don't take any substances on my own. I always stuck to this, including alcohol. The only time I ever had beer on my own was when I first moved to my brand new house, I had a beer. And whenever I crossed over into the States, I would get myself a Budweiser because they were so cheap and they were so America. But this friend talked me, didn't talk me into it. It was my choice. I don't want to put this on anybody in any way, shape, or form. But through what she was telling me, I thought this was something that maybe I should explore, because of the other circumstances. So I did a little test, 1 gram. I walked with God. It was, to this day, the most powerful love in a different way, the way my wife loves me and my daughter will and my family. But in this ethereal, heavenly way, it was the most powerful love. And especially at that moment, right, when I felt so isolated, I was encased with this love, and I walked the grounds of my home with God. It felt like holding me and walking me through all my life issues. And I walked out of that and went, whoa. Now, I need a quick digression. My tattoo artist at the time, Scotty, sadly has passed. Love you. I hope you can hear this. I dream about Scotty still to this day. He had lived a fast life, and he found his God, and he gave up all substances, and he said something to me that I still think about. He said, I told him this story when he was tattooing me, probably my head. He did a lot of my head. And I told him this story with the mushrooms, and he looked me dead in the eye and said, you don't need mushrooms. Wait, let me do it over here. You don't need mushrooms to walk with God. Pretty intense. I love you, Scotty. So that went well, right? My 1 mushroom trip, it was only 1 gram. It was great. So I thought, you know what? Let's nuke this. Let's do 6 grams. We're going to do it over, a little more than a hero dose. And we're just going to take care of all these problems. If I felt that loved on 1 gram, I'm going to feel even more loved on 6. Public service announcement. They are a very special tool that can cause what you're about to hear. So don't just listen to this far into the piece. Let me finish. And then I call myself a socialist in the streets and a libertarian in the sheets. Those are my politics, which will definitely come up in this podcast. So you would make your own choices, but heed the warning. Did the 6 grams and tripped for 4 days straight. Yeah, it was, and remember the whole thing. Ended up being diagnosed, it wasn't a mushroom trip for 4 days, although it don't know where it began, where it ended, what it was diagnosed as drug-induced psychosis. We have dams in our brain of how much substance, how much psychedelics, THC, psilocybin we can take. Some of us have very strong dams, jealous of you. Some of us have very weak dams. Me. I broke my dam. I was found behind my house, naked, hitting my head against a wall. The community, people who love me, came around me, got me help. That's a whole, not an episode. That's going to be a whole series that we'll get into. But I died. I died 6 million different ways. That was the number that kept going through my head. And there was one moment where I think I had a near-death experience. I experienced what it was to die and become everything. And I saw and touched the fabric of the universe. hard swallow, because it was not enough computing power up here to understand it. Whew, and the spiral that sent me down. Not to mention all the other emotional I became shame and guilt. There was one part during this trip, psychosis, that I became the emotion. Now, looking back, further removed from it, maybe that was a great therapeutic moment of understanding this emotion, at least my interpretation of it in a more cerebral, ineffable level. But at the time, I was not ready for this. And that's what I'd want to get across to people using psychedelics like this. Also, by the way, I was alone. Nobody knew I was doing this. Not smart. There are guides for this kind of thing, or even just your loved ones. But I was so alone. I was so alone. Anyways, enough days passed of me tripping, because I tripped for 4 days at my house, and then I went into an emergency room where I was catatonic. And they didn't know what was wrong with me. They thought I had fallen out of a tree and hit my head. And I was having some kind of cognitive breakdown, which kind of was. So when I was in the hospital, I remember all of my crazy trips. But the one that is really relevant and plays in later was I was sitting there catatonic in a hospital bed, couldn't move. And these angels, for lack of a better word, ineffable. They, if I had to describe them, they look like gasoline, orange and blue gasoline. And they came to me and they said, it was the voice of my friends from North Haven. And they were saying, we want to help you, Reggie, but we can't get to you. And I couldn't grasp it. They said, we love you so much. You have all of our love, but we can't get to you. We love you. Good luck. And they left. That was the one bright spot of the entire week. Finally, they sedated me once they found out that it may be that, because they reached out to my mother. And I woke up, I don't know how long later, in a mental ward in the hospital. And my mom was there. I was like, what the? Huh? Where am I? What is this? And wow. Cannot describe. I have a notebook from that time there, and I still have some of my scribings in it. And man, that is the scribings of a madman. Don't wish that upon anyone. Please be careful. So I did get discharged because my mom was there to take me home. And they released me saying that I had symptoms of schizophrenia, positive and negative. They were very intense. 4 out of 5 people with schizophrenia don't come back. They have a version of it long term, or maybe some diminished symptoms that continue on. 4 out of 5. And I had this awful psychosis and was liable to go back into it. And so they had me on benzodiazepine to calm me the heck down, and olanzapine, which is the schizophrenic drug. I was on some heavy doses, and I knew my fear of being medicated for such things, first of all. Second of all, I knew how dangerous benzodiazepine could be in terms of addiction, in terms of what it can do to us once we get deep into it. So I just looked at my mother and was like, I'm not taking these pills. And she was supportive. So I got off everything. My head felt like it was opening, quite literally opening. And I was able to kind of pull it all back, but I would wake up terrified, so scared. I would literally wake up screaming from this. It was so intense. I tried to get on CBD to calm me at night, and placebo maybe, but it was just really intense. Really intense. So I thought to myself, my mom had left at this point. I was screaming, I was scared, and I thought I need to just go home. Remember that theme of home? I never really felt at home, but my mom it felt like home to go back to Ontario and be with my mom. So I left Fort Nova. While I was there, I was talking to a friend of mine whose wife was dying of pancreatic cancer, and he offered me some of because he knew I was on the CBD, he offered me some pills that his wife was taking to cope with her cancer, and it had THC in it as well. So I tried a couple at night just to see if I could sleep and calm these symptoms, and it worked. So I thought, I'm okay. I'm doing better here. This is great. And I was kind of on the mend. And one of my favorite movies was playing. I was like, okay, playing in cinema. I could go see this movie I'd never seen in the cinema before. I thought, okay, well, I'm taking these THC pills. Do you want to see it high, man? So I took some pills and went and saw the movie, and even thinking about it, I totally and utterly relapsed into full-blown psychosis, schizophrenic symptoms, and I thought I was at my own funeral. I looked around that movie theater, and I thought everyone there was at my funeral. I had died. I was dead. This is my funeral. I got out. I left the cinema. I saw more people pouring in. I was like, holy shit, I'm leaving. Oh my God. I had to call my mom and get picked up. And we went to the hospital. And they gave me some sedatives to help me sleep. They were hoping I would just kind of sleep it off. At this point, I'm hallucinating and delusional, and went back to my mom's and tried to get some sleep and feel better. But over the next few days, I just was absolutely tripping. Full trips, delusional, hallucinations, really scary stuff. And this is a moment that my heart goes out to people suffering from psychosis, schizophrenia. But I also think the people who have to see their loved ones going through these things, Mom, my heart goes out to y'all, and big shout out, because that is traumatic. And for her to have to see that, Mom, I'm sorry, and I love you, and thank you for being there. Where I really knew that I needed to get help and be institutionalized, and you know what? I needed to try the medication, was I was having DID, dissociative identity disorder. A lot of people think schizophrenia is when you have multiple personalities in your head, but it's DID. And I would remember going through time in this era where I would sit there and I would have two voices in my head. Intellectually, this is easy to understand. Two voices in your head talking to each other. Until you experience two distinct identities talking in your head, you can't fully grasp it. I went a few days experiencing this, and that was the tipping point where I knew I needed to get institutionalized, because I was having full-on conversations in my head between two distinct identities. One would ask a question, the other would answer, unsure of what the response would be. That was horrifying. And right then and there, I said, Mom, we got to get me checked in somewhere. I don't care what it's like. I need help. So anyone who's suffering from that, my heart goes way, way out. It's changed my perspective of walking down the streets of a busy city and seeing someone down on their luck, talking to themselves, having full-on conversations. I used to see those people and just shrug it off and think, there's a crazy person. Having experienced DID, I look at those people now, and empathy isn't the word. I can viscerally feel and experience that in my head again. And I don't wish that upon anyone. And we were like, okay, I was out of province because the way healthcare worked here. So they institutionalized me. I had to go surrender myself to a pretty big mental institution in Southern Ontario. And this place was terrifying. As if I weren't going through enough trauma as it is. I got stuck in a place that I don't wish on anyone. It was cold and scary and dark and freaky. So I'm in this place with these very unpredictable people. I was in the high security part of it too, where they lock you in your room. Your window has those blinds, but it has the protective sheets over the blinds. You can't smash the windows. My first day there, a few doors down, there was somebody who was screaming quite literally for the entire day, telling people to stop. And it was interesting. A psychiatrist came in to talk to me, and he's the first thing I wanted to talk about, what was going on with me. And the first thing he said was, "What does analog mean?" And I had to think, oh my God, yeah, I think I'm sane, but I also have a word written across my head. That's pretty crazy. Anal OG. Wow. But they saw that I wasn't a threat, and I just wanted to talk to somebody. This is my way to do it. They started also, of course, medicating me. I got back on olanzapine and lorazepam. And I ended up transitioning from the maximum security part of the facility to the minimum security part of the facility. I still wasn't allowed outside, but I had a roommate, could open the doors if I really need to, although they kept you under close surveillance, like flashlights at night. And my roommate was throwing up all night. I knew that this was temporary. I knew I needed to get out of here, but it was a chance to be able to talk to somebody. I got to sit down with a psychiatrist who suggested some medications and wanted me to hook up with a psychologist back in Nova Scotia, and they finally discharged me again to my mother. The big thing that went through my mind here as I started to come down from it was, did I fry my brain? And I cannot tell you how hard that is, even just to say. I looked at myself as somebody with so much potential. Remember on that Rent-A-Goalie set, we're going to work for you one day. And the amazing things I had done in my life, living and working in a creative field and doing well. And now all of a sudden I'm sitting in a mental institution and I'm medicated. And I just sat there and was like, what have I done? What have I done? I have fried my brain. That was 99.9% of my thinking. But that 1.1% was, how can this be my superpower? How can I transmute this into a positive? Even if I had changed my brain composition, maybe I can now make it work for me. That was the only thing that got me through any of those days at that facility. The only thing, the only hope I had was that. So, medicated, released. I didn't take the lorazepam. I had it on hand, but I never took it. So, safety blanket. But the olanzapine, I was sticking to it this time. Who knows what was going on up there? So, months go by. I'm in Ontario. I ended up going back to Nova Scotia, and I am a robot. Flat out depressed, dissociative, no emotions. I just was losing it in a different way. I was not human anymore. So I thought to myself, I want to get off this schizophrenia drug. I'm not having any hallucinations. I'm just dead. So I tried and I tried and I tried to get in touch with the Nova Scotia medical community, and they're backed up. They're backlogged. It's difficult. It's hard. I'm not putting blame, but I didn't get the attention I needed. I got slated for 3 months later when my script was going to run out to get together with a psychiatrist to try to work through getting me off of it, if they would even approve that. And I thought I still got free will, I think, determinism. And I thought I'm going to get off this. So I talked to a pharmacist and worked out a plan of weaning, because off of something that heavy duty, one must wean. So over the next month or two, I tapered down, and I will never forget the day that I got that medication out of my system. From what I understand, kicking heroin is like, I feel like this would be similar. The dry sweats, the worried thoughts, the fear, the vomiting, the illness, the diarrhea, the like just flu-like symptoms. And the scariest of all, ideation. Now, what I was feeling before was definitely existential dread, because what I experienced in this regard was heavy duty. I get it now, the difference between the two. Idealization means thinking that things would be better if, right? Things are going to be better if I wasn't here. But when I was detoxing from these drugs, it turned into ideation. Ideation means considering ideas around the topic as well as conceptualizing. And that's when things get dangerous. I was planning. I was thinking how. It was the only answer, and it felt like a friend, as odd as that is to say. And some of my friends were there for me every day talking about it. A friend of mine did research and was like, yo, you're having these feelings because this drug is getting out of your system. Looking back, do not get off of your medication without, I went to a pharmacist, that is true, but talk to the actual doctor prescribing. Please. Maybe this should be in this game, but please. Our mind is a fragile thing. That was with did I fry my brain and then this happening? Our minds are precious and valuable and so powerful. So please be careful with it. With great power comes great responsibility. Like Uncle Ben said, okay? My daughter's going to have an Uncle Ben. I think that's so lovely. Big up, Ben. All right. So now I'm off, detox through the drug, miserable. The depression's still there. I'm at least sad, like on a level where I'm crying. I'm not a robot. Deep, deep depression, though. And I remember talking to my doctor, like as much as I feared medication, I talked to my doctor, who was so sweet, like my family doctor. And I was like, I want to try an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And these are often antidepressants. And I was like, I want to try one. I want to figure it out. A big thing for me was my libido was gone. So I told my doctor, like, get me on an SSRI, but like, I need to at least, that needs to work. So I feel human, something to feel and to have any kind of pleasure, my God. So he got back to me finally with an option, but he's like, I can't in good conscience prescribe this to you because one of the side effects is idealization. And I'm like, what kind of antidepressant is this if it makes you feel this way? We're not going there yet. Anyways, I didn't get on the drug, but I felt something had to give. There was one moment while I was in my cell, for lack of a better word, when I was pushed up against the corner, huddled, and I was so scared, and an entity, like a bright being, crawled along the wall, crawled along the floor, but it wasn't scary. It was pure peace, pure love, and it came up and it came into me and into my chest. And I felt peace. I felt okay. But it was that same feeling from when I was in the psych ward back in Nova Scotia, where it was like, I can't help you. You're in this alone, kid. I love you. You got to do this on your own. And it went out of me. I don't know what that was, but it happened. Up here, at least. And that's the big thing with psychedelics that I would like to get established as we start to progress is these things, although they don't happen in reality, the things that we experience through psychedelics, they're real up here. Therefore, they're real. So my only two bright spots during these terrifying trips to the psych wards were my friends from the road, North Haven, who at this point had gotten off the road and started a refuge. They bought a mountaintop. Who buys a mountaintop? But they bought a mountaintop that had a chalet on it, and that was their refuge for the broken, where they bring people who need help. Remember the wizard Michael, who told them, Reggie doesn't need you yet? Wizards know, because I needed them now. And I called and I laid it out, and they said, come to us. Come for 2 weeks. We're going to get through this together. Trying to get on that plane, the lead up and think about getting on that plane, the plane's going to crash, an air marshal, this is flying to the States, they're in Washington State, so an air marshal tackling me in the air because I'm having a panic attack. And Nessa at North Haven just said, have your lorazepam with you? Safety blanket, psychology, safety blanket. Take it if you need, or just keep it with you, and you'll be okay. And I remember my neighbor, Bubba, family, saying to me, you getting on that plane is the first step to you getting better. So I did it. I bit the bullet. Plane ride was fine, got picked up at the airport from my friends. And my God, for the next 2 weeks was I showered with love and attention. Every day, believe me, I was still tripping. I remember at one point being in the cabin. I had my own cabin, and I was like, I'm in a cave. I'm in a cave in some like destitute area, and I was still going there. But over the 2 weeks, every day, therapy session, narrative therapy, telling my story. My friend Nessa explaining some of her, who's a very holistic healer, explaining and seer of things, explaining what some of these symbols that I experienced on my trip meant. We did yoga every day, getting in touch with ourselves physically. They massaged me every friggin' day. Can I just go back for the massage, please? We did it all, including writing a letter to myself, explaining what I had gone through and what this was. At this point, I was wasting away, and I was eating like a king. The food was talking about, issues with past relationships. And I felt like I was back in therapy again and just having a chance to have someone to talk to, not turning towards a chemical. Just the way to do it. It was her watching me over these 2 weeks where she was so attuned with my nervous system that there were times where I was having a panic attack, and she would stop me and say, Reggie, here's what's happening. Your adrenals are dumping. You stop talking. Tunnel vision. Look, you're almost shaking. You're rigid. These weren't even things that I was noticing. I remember specifically a moment when we were in the car. I was in the front seat. Matt, Nessa's husband, was driving, and Nessa was in the back seat, and she said she could tell that I was going off, and she said, stop. So Matt stopped the car. She came around to the passenger side door, opened up the door, stood there, took my hands, and was like, here's what's happening. I didn't even know what was happening to me. It's powerful stuff. And something that I want to take forward into the therapies that I eventually do. To be that much of a intuition about other people, to be able to read people that clearly. What a gift. And as the person who was observed that way, that was humbling. That was humbling. When you think you know yourself, you know what's going on, and someone showing you that you might not, especially about something so serious, as your nervous system just giving you full out panic, humbling. My brain has a grasp on thinking and intellectual ideas, but when it comes to some emotion and some coping mechanisms, it overrides. My gut overrides, my heart overrides, and my brain is left going, now what? What's going on? What? How do I behave within this environment that is not ideal? I was crashed out, done, tapped out, mentally, emotionally, and Nessa, my spiritual guide, looked at me and said, "What do you want?" And the only thing I said back was a family. And this is where things started to change. Was Nessa basically was like, "Hey, hate to break it to you, buddy, but you're having a spiritual awakening. Listen to everything you're telling me. These angels, this walking with God, this, you have something awakening in you, whether you like it or not. So you're going to want to get in touch with that. Figure it out what it is for you. It's talking to you. So you should probably listen. Start working with it instead of against it, or going to other avenues to try to probably find what's looking for you." Whew, that gives me goosebumps. But the key to this therapy was that I had attention and people focusing on me. And the key was them explaining to me, you're not crazy. Similar to when I was in therapy and formal therapy in the past, and was, you don't have personality disorder. You're not bipolar. This time it was, you're not crazy. You have an anxiety disorder. You have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Because like I said, when I was on these psychedelics, the visions that I saw may not have been able to be seen by others, but they were happening in here so real. What's the diff? And to die 6 million times? I was eaten by a bear, live, because they don't kill their prey before they eat them. I was eaten by a bear. That happened. That's pretty traumatic. It's our primal self trying to protect us from threat. And what I had done with psychedelics, not only was it abstract that it wasn't in the world, these were like nightmares. So instead of trying to combat something that might be more in the real world of reality, somebody who had broken in previously and learning to cope with that, all of a sudden I'm wrestling things that are abstract and dream-like. That's pretty intense. And it's just total side note, going back to the formal therapy I took, he talked a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, and I didn't understand why. Maybe I had been wrestling this anxiety disorder and PTSD for a lot longer than even I had known. So with all this love, they sent me on my way with, you better believe, if you got an issue, you come right back here. We will love you to death. But you got this. And I left with a plan, a diagnosis and a plan. Routine. Every morning I get up, I read my letter to myself. I move in inspired action. There will be an episode on this. Thank you for that, Nessa. Which meant propelling myself forward, doing something to create, to make my life more enriched. And if there's nothing you can find, clean. It's true. Time of gratitude doesn't have to be tied to any spirituality or religion, just be grateful for what you have. You're lucky to be alive. What are some of the things in your life? Good food, real food, self-care, hygiene, have a shower, get into bed. And because I was having so many problems sleeping, put on a colorful cartoon every night, same one, predictable. Because the whole key, as was explained to me, was just to calm down my sympathetic nervous system, which was raging, blasting my adrenals like crazy. My heart was upset with what I had done to it, arguably, for 40 years. And now it needed to be in its own way, its own voice, its own language. It's like a child inside of us. It needs to be calmed down after what my brain, which is way too fast, lightning, fire, decided to do all these roundabout ways of getting help instead of slowing things down. So I needed to learn how to calm myself, maybe for the first time in 40 years. Whew. Breathing, yoga, chill, bro. Get in touch with what's going on in here. Learn about cognitive dissonance. When your heart has a different idea than your brain and you try to fight it. One major thing that I used in my progression through this was cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a psychological tool that basically anyone can do. For me, my spiritual guide, Nessa at North Haven, got me a CBT, not only a theory book to read through, but also a CBT journal, which very simple. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm actually experiencing. How could that be reframed? There are more things in the workbook, but those general ideas, putting those two together when you're suffering from PTSD, from psychedelics, when you are having a slippery grip on reality, putting on paper, and there are tons of studies of how important it is to write for therapy. There are so many. So being able to write down what is abstract in your mind, what is real in reality on paper, whew, powerful tool. Anyone can do it. Even me. Anyways, it was a long road. But I was given tools. And I don't want to on the medical system. They do the best they can with the tools and resources they have. That's ridiculous to think that they could give me 2 weeks, and especially with people who are my genuine friends, family. That's pie in the sky. However, we should probably have some kind of middle ground, right? As Aristotle said, one of the most important quotes of all time, virtue is a mean. And also just, throwing drugs at people, this is the nuance of it. Maybe those schizophrenia drugs saved my brain. As somebody who prefers to go a more holistic route always, I'll be the first to admit, maybe those drugs, and at least even though I did take them long enough to be hooked, chemically, maybe those drugs did save me. I'll admit that. But the idea of going in and just getting an hour with a psychiatrist and then getting these drugs and then my follow-up being months later, that's not enough either. And I thank my lucky stars. I thank the people who helped me, the system that helped me, the love. I thank myself for not giving up. Because the odds said that I could have been on the other side of things. Still been suffering. As you can imagine, anyone who knows I don't know if it's called a fairy tale, but then the story of Scrooge, who goes through this incredibly phantasmagorical adventure and all of a sudden wakes up in his bed and he is the lucky recipient of post-traumatic growth. I mean, I keep talking about the post-traumatic stress disorder that I've been experiencing, but also, I mean, this is a great example of post-traumatic growth. Was it as quick as a victory as Scrooge? I didn't wake up the next morning, kick my window open and yell, "I love Christmas!" It took a little longer than that. However, I am an example of somebody who's made it through, who fought, and I have post-traumatic growth. And now when I watch Scrooge, especially the 80s Bill Murray version, which I love, that's one of the best Christmas movies. Bill Murray, 89, I think, Scrooged. Watch it. Hits a little different, as you can imagine. Just to be clear, I do not recommend psychedelics to cure what ails you. Yes, I believe that they played a massive, gigantic role in my evolution. However, I do believe I would have been heading in that same direction regardless. It would have taken a lot longer to get here. However, I do think the long road would have been more fruitful, would have made a lot more sense, and saved me going through my personal hell. So anyone thinking of going the route that I went, before you choose that, imagine what your personal hell could be. Because careful what you wish for. If you want to evolve using the turbo button, experiencing your own personal hell for years might be what you go through. So I do not recommend psychedelics to cure what ails you. PSA. That was a PSA. Public service announcement. Okay, we're about to get into the good stuff, which I'll go very quick because, you know, sex sells. We put most of the time into all the yucky stuff. People, the Joseph Campbell people keeping tabs at home. I'm out of the cave. The phoenix is rising. Before we get there, I didn't mention relationships other than the one that really had relevance. As you can imagine with the preamble, they didn't go well. I'm sorry. Not a very evolved human. I'm sorry if I set anyone back, because that's the thing that really came to light later was, you know, people are trying to get places, and so was I. And the time that I kind of that in the truest sense of the word, don't get mad at me. I'm sorry for that. And I mean, nuance, it takes two to tango always. I'm not going to sit here and self-flagellate completely, but I'm sorry. And I hope everyone I've ever come across is thriving, doing exactly what they like. So back to inspired action. I started doing things every day, even if it was just cleaning the house, to propel me forward, to get to the next step. And all of a sudden, I was presented with a job. Like a real job. I remember previous, I'm a freelance for 21 years, right? Like I'm freelance, I'm a hired gun, I've never had a boss per se, like people you answer to, but I'm freelance. Like I'm my own boss. I'm my own company, and people come to me, and I do work, and I never had real hours. I've never had vacation pay, which is always a problem in relationships because the people I was usually with had real jobs, so they get paid to go on vacation, whereas I lose money plus I'm paying for the anyways. I got offered a job at a university doing film stuff. So it's not like I was going to go do something that's out of my wheelhouse. In fact, it's, you know, motivating and fun and awesome. And I was like, no. I really did. I made them chase me for like a year because I was scared to be tied down. I've never done that before. But I thought about it. Benefits? Whoa. Security? This routine thing that I was doing for my mental health was working. So maybe the routine of a job would be good. Okay. And then I also thought, I had a hell of a story to tell, and I would really like to help people. I really liked what my therapist was doing all those years ago. But I didn't have the money. I didn't have the smarts to become a doctor. Okay, but now I got a university offering me a job. So what if, hear me out. What if I took the job at the university and part of the gig was that I get to go back to school? I become a psychologist at 40. Let's do this. So I took the job, applied for, still to apply, but I was terrified because I reached out to the acceptance people, the people who not recruit, but the people who allow people in. Wow, I work at a university, and I want to take these courses. I want to get this degree, and they said, okay, great, just send through your transcript. And they looked at my high school transcript. Things will bite you in the butt, kids. They went, we want to help you, but it's, you might have to take some high school level classes and like up the ante here a little bit. And I was like, you know what? You reap what you sow. Bite you in the butt. You reap what you sow, but you bounce back. And I was like, let's do this. So I applied, and I wrote a hell of a cover letter. In that cover letter, I took what my first day of film school teacher said to me. You want to be a director? You're in the wrong program. You should be in psychology, because they're the same thing. A director needs to know the psyche. You need to know the shots, but arguably you don't. You have some directors that just leave that to the director of photography. What you do need to know is performance, the human mind, human motivation. What's my motivation? Director needs to know that. So I wrote a heck of a cover letter being like, here's the dealio. I have been doing psychology for 21 years. Please? And I'm sure there's a little bit of cronyism. They knew who I was because I work at the school. I'm kind of hard to miss. It's a freaking anal OG on my face. I'll never forget that psychiatrist bringing that up. I got in. The first time, remember, I went to school, I didn't get in on my own merit. It was because my dad had to pass to propel me forward. And I guess in this way, like I just said, there's a little bit of cronyism, but I got in on my own merit. In that moment, I cried. I cried. I still, at my office in front of me, have the acceptance letter. I look at it every single day. It's right above my computer. It was a game changer. So all of a sudden, I'm back in school. 40 years old. Everybody younger than me in my class. They're 18. They're more than half my age, which is pretty hilarious. But it's crazy because all of a sudden, that dumb kid who could barely make a C in high school on a good day. A+. I wrote a scientific paper last semester. For me, it was just a first year paper, but still based it on the negative impacts of augmented reality on a child's sense of self and development before the acquisition of theory of mind. So what I thought was, if one can't even look in the mirror and recognize oneself, looking at a augmented image of yourself on a phone, likely pretty dangerous. The paper has been written. Read it if you like. It's interesting stuff. I don't mean my paper, just the science of what these phones with our primitive brains, something I'm really looking forward to studying further. And it's like sciencey and crazy, and I didn't know I had intellect in there, but there's proof in the pudding. However, as we explore things from all angles, which is what we do on this show, the Dunning-Kruger effect where people overestimate just how smart they are. Could be happening here, folks. The jury's still out on that one, but I hope not. But I own it. That might be the case. I might have ambition to do this, be way underqualified, and just be talking out of my ass. Wouldn't be the first time. A big part of negative self-talk that almost stopped me in my tracks, or at least I had to consider, was that I pictured all these people who knew me prior when I was a total train wreck of sorts. Iconoclastic. I prefer iconoclastic. Them finding out that I wanted to become a psychologist and help people, I pictured them all thinking, that guy's a train wreck. How could he possibly help anyone? He wouldn't be giving advice that anyone would want to hear. I mean, look at me. You're taking advice from this guy? But then again, I was like, how can I transmute this into my superpower? So now I'm in school. I can see that I have the intellect and I'm going to excel. I'm going to get my degree. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of putting in the time, and I'm willing to do so. And I think it's kind of the perfect mix. I'm going to have this formal education totally by the board of the Canadian Psychiatric Association. I will be ready to counsel people. And then on this other side, I've been through the ringer. I had to gain identity in my adulthood. I've had symptoms of borderline personality. I've been schizophrenic, psychosis, DID, dissociative identity disorder. And I made it out on the other side. Wouldn't that be an advantage to have a therapist who's not only read about these diagnoses in the DSM, but who has experienced them? So once I got over that hump and I started my education, I thought to myself, who cares what those people who look at me and think, this guy? Because I know the work that I'm going to do has a very special little sprinkling. Because I've been there. And that would be an awesome therapist to have. And I get to be that. So I look at this world that I see coming together for me where I'm getting formally trained, Western psychology, being in the system. But what really saved me was homeopathic, empathetic human connection through Nessa and North Haven. And what I'm seeing come together in my path are these two things. And wow, that is overwhelming to think of being able to bring that together. So powerful and so for the greater good. I can't stop. One of the things I think about in terms of me becoming a therapist that I love is that I'm on this trajectory. I'm going to get my doctorate probably in 10 years because I can't go quickly because this work and family, everything now. This is the perils of being 40 and trying to get your degree. But the cool thing is I'm on a collision course with a cough and people who need help. So out there right now is somebody who in 10 years is going to look someone up or find me through, I'll be placed with them through socialized psychological help. And we're on a collision course. And I'm going to get to help these people. I need like 8.5 more years. But I'm coming for you. And I'm going to offer my hand. And I'm going to help you. Hang tight. I wish someone had said that to me when I was suffering. And I mean, in a roundabout way, I told you my story. People really did. I was just too stubborn to see it. But we'll meet. And we'll level up together. That is what I'm most excited about. And so I took the job out of university. We got the manifest functions. which are the decisions that you make that are on purpose, built in. I got a job. Latent functions. Latent functions are the things that come along with it, that are like, hey, this is pretty sweet. Big one is my grip on health. I'm going to the gym every single day that I can. I put on 15 pounds of muscle. Looking good. I honestly don't even recognize myself anymore. I'm actually getting some kind of shoulders and that's weird. Well, I mean, shoulders for me. So it's a lesson in relativity. These are gigantic in my regard. Look at these pictures. Look, who's this string bean? Who's this string bean? It's meat on me now. And what that has done for my self-esteem, my self-image, my concept of my masculinity, man, exercise is a drug. That's a drug I want to be on. That's the drug we do, kids. But I'm also getting a grip on my health, getting into middle age, where we have to avoid sacropecia. Our muscles start to deteriorate. Better late than never. Believe me, I wish I got fit. I mean, I've always been able to run. I've been very lucky genetically, heart-wise, but you know, the rest of me, it's like now I'm starting to lift weight. I see my testosterone go up because I'm lifting weights. Like, this is something we all need to get a handle on. And I highly recommend jobs at universities. Okay, if you're cheap like me and you don't want to pay for a gym, it's great. So now I'm propelling myself forward, getting my psychology degree. And remember when I said this? What do you want? And the only thing I said back was a family. We're getting there. Who knew heaven was a place on earth? If I could afford the rights to an 80s song, this would be the moment. I really like that song, by the way. I've like rediscovered it lately. And this will be a whole separate story. In fact, my wife and I have a podcast. It's called You're So Cool. Check it out. Spotify, YouTube, You're So Cool. You'll get the whole story. But for this purpose, I dated a gal who was here, but she was moving back to Calgary. Long story that you can check out. And man, did we hit it off. So we dated long distance for 4 months, and we had a date set to break up, and we followed through on it. We did. We followed through. January 3rd, we were done. The next day, against all odds, she found out that she was pregnant. IUD, copper IUD, wasn't even ovulating. So obviously the breakup was off. We ended up getting married in Las Vegas after only spending 28 days together in person. And after a journeyman relationship person, all very poor. It's legit. The old adage, when you know, you know. I knew. I know. It's done. No more looking. I hope the same for her. And we are on the verge of having a child. I'm having a little girl, literally this week at some point. She's due on the weekend. So also within this time of rising, I got to work. I'm in Nova Scotia. I got to work with the Trailer Park Boys. Just a quick aside. Again, what a charmed life. I've got to do the things that, like in high school, they got me into this. And as I kind of even further transition out of filmmaking in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm just starting this, so it's kind of still going, you know? I got to work with them. And that was it was good to meet your heroes situation. Ineffable. Mountaintop moment. I've had a lot of mountaintops. I'm a lucky guy. What can I say? My daughter isn't even born yet. When I thought experiment this, looking back at me in high school, was this in there? Could just raw intellect be in there, be dormant, and I was just kind of taken over by these needs, these emotional needs that weren't being fulfilled, and I was missing out on this? Or was there some kind of neural bloom from my mushroom trip, spiritual expansion? I don't know. But man, that's interesting. Regardless, I just don't think as a person I was equipped to go into this field of study. I needed to go through this time. I needed to go through this gauntlet. My God, did I go through a gauntlet. But I also got to have a lot of fun. Like, what a cool life. Getting paid to play for 22 years. Like, that was awesome. That was awesome. And that's where I think even how life is now so structured. I'm married. I got a job. Baby. I'm ready for this. Psilocybin, it's a fact, is neurogenerative and increases neuroplasticity. When we're 25, our prefrontal cortex, our decision-making, our avoidance of risk, literally front of our brain, isn't yet connected to our limbic system, which is raw emotion, fear, lust, all the things that we're primally go after in a more antiquated part of our brain. They connect over time, and the two pieces come together around 25. And that's where our brains are fully formed, and all of a sudden now our emotions are connected to our decision-making hardware, parts of our brain. I am now, like, on paper, those have connected. And I wonder if drugs, psilocybin, spirituality, expansion of that, I wonder if on a physical, scientific level that what should have happened at 25 happened at close to 40. We don't know. But it makes for a hell of a good story, doesn't it? All right, just to wrap up the Joseph Campbell thing. Last step. Phoenix has risen. Return to the original world. But this time with the magic elixir. I don't mean like a literal potion. Like I've gained something. I've learned something. I'm, in my case, back in reality. With, okay, Star Wars, Luke, the Force, he returns in the end after the Phoenix. I have something to offer. I'm back and I have something to offer. Believe me, I still, what the constantly, WTF. Remember that 99.9% of me so fried my brain, 0.1%. I use it to my advantage. The way I can now connect things, it feels like I feel like I can read people, read situations, connect what's going on within them, within me. I'm more empathetic. I'm more emotional. I'm more present. I'm less risk-taking. I'm more prepping for the future. And remember, to bring it back, Erik Erikson, Reggieson, the penultimate stage is generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is being a part of the community, being part of a system, helping people, and pushing the next generation forward. I'm becoming a psychologist to help people. I'm doing this to help people, which will be more obvious later. As if. This is pretty, like my sharing, I hope it's helping people. I take that back. I'm having a child, starting the next generation. And my God, am I going deep on the psychology of that and developmental psychology. She's going to be lucky to have me as a dad. I can say that. I'm so proud. My dad would be so proud of me. I mean, not only did I follow in his footsteps, I also, in a lot of ways, went beyond and am becoming an intellectual at university, which he didn't choose to do, despite having the abilities. But even beyond that, I became a good man. I bet my dad's still taking pictures of me somewhere. But Erickson's stage is generativity or stagnation. I hit it. This stage goes from 30 to about 60, 65. And I hit it. And now I look back at all those past stages. And now that I've pulled things together, those past stages are retroactively coming together. Not in those moments. Unfortunately, they are what they are. This is how time works. But I can now look back at those situations with this lens, opposed to a lens of being lost or broken. And I can now see how things went. And with my daughter on the way, I hope that I had to instill this in myself at 40. That's a lot of heavy lifting. My goal is to instill it in her when she's young. And I do the heavy lifting for her. And she gets to enjoy this amazing world, ready, willing, and able to adventure and expand into whatever she's going to be. I think I'm truly expanding into my full form from 40 on. I hope that she gets to expand into her full form from 0 on. And that, to me, seems like that's what life is all about. Selflessly giving back to the next generation. I'm on the right path now. The beauty is I've made it to this level. And now the next stage, the last stage, is integrity on the good hand and despair on the other. And that's how things wind up. And somebody who was terrified of getting old, not being able to cope, not having relationships, being isolated. I was so scared. That's somebody who winds up in despair. And sadly will have a poorer end to this, whatever this is. And I remember a friend of mine, Jamie Pierce, saying, "You're right on time. Just keep reaching up." And I actually buy it now. I'm right on time. And I will keep reaching up. Which means when I get in 65 plus, I get into that last stage of Erickson's life stages. I'm going to be in integrity. And I've got a family, a wife, and a daughter for sure one, by my side for when I draw my last breath. So all that fear of death, it's not as scary. It's still scary. And believe me, part of me still thinks I am laying dead in that trailer 2 years ago. And this is some weird afterlife. And I'm supposed to live out what should have happened in a better world. And is this limbo? Am I crossing over? But what can I do? I still have to carry on whatever existence this is. There's a horseshoe in my ass now. It seems like everything's going so well. But maybe I'm making the right steps. Regardless, I know that I'm setting myself up for the future. That is such a core for this life. Better late than never. I don't know what this is, but I have to keep going with it. So, here we go. And scene. Oh. Every episode is going to be similar in that it starts with a backstory. Maybe it's anecdotal, maybe it's something that I see or I give the full breadth of what we're going to work on. This one was a lot, extremely extra long because, and it's an easy one. Because, I heard a great man once say, pitch what you know. And if there's anything that I know, it's my life. So I had a lot to say. But now we're going to transition into more the psychology side of it, the stuff that I'm learning, the stuff that really interests me, the why, the psychology of why. Ambition, desire, need. Is it inherent? Is it external? The nature versus nurture debate. What is creativity? Where does it come from? Why do I feel the need to do this? So we're going to treat this like a therapy session. I laid out my entire backstory for you, and now we're going to kind of pull it apart and figure out the crux of why. Okay, so a little tiny bit of extra context in regard to the why of this. I have been making content arguably my entire life. My dad was a filmmaker, so I had a camera in my face way before anything called social media, and it was all VHS. There was none of this, but close enough. I've always been doing this stuff, but this is on a level that I can't even begin to put into words how important it is that I do this. This podcast, this thing, this exploration. Like, I am waking up in the middle of the night and either scribing down ideas, or I sit and rehearse this, and I can't help it. It is automatic, and to be honest, it's starting to annoy me. So I feel like I need to do this just to be able to progress in life. A daughter on the way. The funny thing is, this burning ambition and need within me to create and progress, I kind of wish I didn't have it. Actually, I'm so jealous of those people who can just like, go do my 9 to 5, chill, and life, get home, slough it all off, and just, hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. I don't know. God, that guy needs a hobby. I wish I was that guy they were talking about. I do. There was a time in the film industry where it slowed right down for me, and I was having a really hard time with it. Identity, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it'd be best if I just like remove myself from the industry. I went and worked in a tattoo shop somewhere where I didn't have homework, and I had, fairly set hours. I mean, tattoo shops probably a little more fluid, but the idea of just having something like that was intoxicating. Something in me just couldn't do it. Ego, that I couldn't take a regular job. There's something in there that just needs to keep achieving, keep progressing, be creative, make things, go for it. What I really need are confirmed 50 lifetimes to achieve everything I want to do. Can somebody make that happen for me? Not yet? Okay. So now, super intense feelings, and I've been trying to kind of work through this and see this. And again, the synapses are firing, and I'm now sitting here looking back over my life and being like, whoa, has this been lying in wait all along? Well, I remember well over a decade ago when PewDiePie started doing internet vlogging or whatever. I remember my sister pulling me aside and being like, you need to do this. You would be great at this. You need to do this. I just wasn't interested. That wasn't my jam. I wanted to do scripted comedy. I wanted to wear a mask. I didn't want to be real. And I don't think there was as much as a market for it, to be honest. Although he did very well for himself now, didn't he? But that came to mind. And then I remember a few years later, maybe 5 years later, 10 years later, my friend Jamie saying to me, talking about some of my content at one point, him being like, you know, the one thing that's missing from your content is like the real you. You need to sit down and talk. And again, I was like, I'm not ready. But like my mind, I'm still firing back and being like, oh, maybe it was in there. Yeah. And then as now recently things have been firing up a little more, a recent podcast said, hey, and I quote, you're 40. So what? You're still breathing. Go out there and get your dreams. And I'm sitting here listening to this podcast and I'm like, that's talking directly to me. And right, like now I have a connection to God too. I'm like, that's God talking. That's right to me. I gotta do this podcast. But then I got scared. And I was like, well, why would I start doing this podcast when I don't even have my full degree yet, right? Like, I'm just a psychology student. What right do I have to say about any of this stuff? And then another podcast said this line from the Torah, from Hebrew. I'm not going to get it right. I have to read it. I'm not going to get it right. Na'asha vanishma. How'd I do? Is that? Because if not, please don't circumcise me further. If not, I don't have the extra skin, so that would be very scary. But the line killed me, because exactly what I was worried about. This slayed it, because that means we will do and we will understand. The whole point of the piece is that you don't need to be fully qualified to start, to learn. Throw yourself at something and you will learn on the way. So this was obviously, God, I can't talk it right to me. I have to do this. But AI. Oh my God, I've been freaking myself out about AI. What's the point of me doing this podcast, putting in this work, turning my basement into a studio and like spending so much time doing this? Like, why would I do this if it's just for my own thing? When AI's out there and can just copy me and do me, and all this information is blatantly out there. You don't need to hear it from me. So I talked to AI and it validated me. But of course, it needs the human voice. It needs your story. No one has your story. But that's what AI does. It validates. And anyways, which I appreciate. I'll take it. I'll take the pats on the back when I can get them. Oh, and then I was at a charity auction the other day, and this for free. I was given this for free. That's a podcast mic. Look at that. Now, I tested it out, and it was not. It was free for a reason. It wasn't great. And like, I didn't want this look with the like, or maybe that's, I don't know. Is that cool? Is that cooler? Anyways, I ended up using my old Neumann KRM82i, I think it's called, for the audio files out there. Old film mic. I've had this thing since, anyways, it's incredible. But I took that as another sign. I have to do this. Clearly, it's a sign from God. Or is it confirmation bias? We gotta get real, people. Am I just seeing these signs, thinking back to these past signs, just because I'm interested in doing something? And I'm confirming all of these wants and needs with the things that I hear and only accepting those? That's what confirmation bias is. It's only affirming what you want to hear, what you believe in. Because I gotta admit, at the same time, I'm tuning out the famous people who are like, yo, fame and money and power aren't all they're cracked up to be. Jim Carrey's famous for saying that. The guy's making $20 million a movie. Lady Gaga has talked about the mental health problems that fame brings on. I'm choosing to ignore those. But it's funny because when I need confirmation the other way, when I'm depressed and sad that I didn't make the fame, I didn't make the money, I didn't make the prestige, all of a sudden the confirmation bias goes the other way. And I think about what Jim Carrey said. I think about what Lady Gaga said. Recently, Ryan Reynolds was in Toronto for the the Toronto International Film Festival. And he said that, I'm going to just paraphrase, that too much time and too much money can hamper, definitely didn't use that word, but stunt creativity. And I hear that and I'm like, oh, so okay, confirmed. I don't want fame and I don't want time. I need to keep pumping and I need to be, under strict deadlines and not have money, and that's how I have to do it. Confirmation bias. We hear what we want to in the world very often and use it to motivate us. And this is so important with how much mass media there is now. Take note. Take note. We must examine our needs, wants, and desires. Also, I've been striving for this fame and money for years, 22 years of trying. And like, I've done some cool stuff, but like nothing to write home about. And I'm like, okay, how funny would it be? Similar when I got off the road and I got a TV show when I was living in rural Nova Scotia. I was in Toronto. I finally got my TV show. Maybe this simple me being open and real and honest, no mask, maybe this is what blows up. But then the hedonistic treadmill. We're never satisfied. This is a big red flag. We need to consider this. If this blows up, this is awesome. That's great. But do I really think this is the ultimate? Of course not. We're built, evolutionary psychologists, we're built to constantly move to the next thing. So we need to be conscious of that. I need to be conscious of that while doing this. I mean, it is a fact that some mega lottery winners, they return to baseline very soon after the wow of winning. Now, I will admit, my baseline has changed drastically through evolution, but it's still a fact. Okay, so we went kind of scraping the surface here, a little more macro. Let's go micro. Let's go psychoanalytical. Let's get into it. Freud. Here we go. My id. An id is the total pleasure-seeking side within us. The devil on the shoulder. Is this project it's me talking in the camera, intimate, super intimate, just me, my ideas, my thoughts, right to you, trying to be a star? Is that just the devil on my shoulder trying to get me validation, love, respect, being heralded by the people? Maybe. Or is it the other side though, right? Because as my id was growing, getting all awful, on the other side is my superego. And my superego looks at the morals and values and what the world expects and how to contribute to society. And that's the angel on the other side. Hopefully my id, as it grew and got ugly, and maybe still is, maybe my superego, there's no doubt that has improved and is maybe where my ego is me and where I decide. So anyways, what I'm saying is this could be a purely pleasure-seeking venture. Freud is also the sublimation guy, and he's darn right about that. I take my pain, my hurt, my need for attention, validation, and I focus it in on filmmaking and entertainment and media. And don't worry, I am very self-aware. And it's funny because I just finished, over the summer, I did a course, English literature, and I had to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And it was chilling. I sat there, I had to even just little check myself PTSD-wise. This is kind of trippy. I've never really read this or understood it, and now I'm being forced to analyze it. And the real, theme of the book is unchecked ambition. It's kind of the whole point of it. Robert, at the beginning, he's on this, excursion out to the Arctic, runs into Dr. Frankenstein's monster, Dr. Frankenstein's ambition. Through Dr. Frankenstein's stories, Robert goes, oh, maybe I'm not going to go into the Arctic because of Frankenstein's unchecked ambition. Again, I am very aware of this. Unchecked ambition would be the id talking. Checked ambition, I hope, is my superego. Psychoanalytically, I'm aware of it, and it all is likely true. Okay, that was fun to play in the abstract, Freudian psychoanalytics, but let's go into just pure science. Brains are just full of neurons. Neurons connect at synapses. Different neurons connect in different places, the synaptic cleft, where they exchange information between ventricles and axons. And maybe that's all that's happened. My whole life has just been these synapses coming together. Maybe now, perhaps with more neuroplasticity from the trauma I went through, post-traumatic growth, maybe that is what is giving me this whole new level of excitement. And the aha center of the brain, when one of those big connections happens, it lights up our reward center. So maybe I just took all the psychology stuff I'm learning, all my past experiences. I had an aha moment, and this is giving me just like, oh, I need to do this. And it might just be pure science. Maybe I'm getting a little dopamine hit from this. It's like a drug, baby. Maybe this is just about reward. It's just straight up brain chemistry reward. Maybe. Within the science side of it, maybe this is just a totally, absolutely logical next progression. Doing long-form presentation of my experiences through the filmmaking media, this is just a logical progression as things have amped up over my career and what I love. And this is where my flow state is. This marries filmmaking, psychology, and it's challenging having to come up with this stuff on a filmmaking level, storytelling-wise. It's challenging to explore psychological aspects that I'm just learning now. Flow state is when you take things that are the perfect amount difficult, the perfect amount of effort that has to go into it, and you just sink into just simplicity and zen, and you just float through and flow through, let it flow out. So maybe this is just perfect flow state for me that I've been searching for. I'm going to say the psychologist's name because it's really, I'm going to put it on the screen. The flow state, the psychologist who discovered flow state is, I'm going to try to pronounce it off. Psychoanalytic. There was an apostrophe S, so drop the S off of that and say it. Speed it up. Can we cut back and speed me saying that up? He discovered flow state, which is utilizing hormesis. Hormesis is where we get the right amount of stress. Too little stress, there's no point of doing something. Too much stress, there's no point of doing something. But when you find that center point where you get just the right amount of stress, and I feel stress wanting to do this, doing this, and putting it out there. Hormesis. Flow state and hormesis. That's what we want to look for, people. And maybe that's all I'm doing. All right. As I've said, I'm midlife. Time horizon, I have felt it shrink. I like to think of it as a tree, the tree of life. And when you're young and at the bottom, it's just endless possibilities to get to the tips of the branches. I'm doing this. You can't see them up here. I feel like I've hit an age where I realize that my connections of where I can go to the tip of the branch, they're starting to get less and less. Believe me, I know I'm not, I've decided that I'm old young. I look at it that everything 40 and back is young. Everything 40 to 60 is like old young. And then everything 60 to like 70 is like young old. And then everything post 70 is old. But 70 is the new 60, mind you. And that cascades back, so I'm just trying to comfort myself. So there is a thing called mortality salience, which is like death coming to mind. It is real, and it will affect all of us. None of us are making it out of here alive. And when you're young, it's intellectually you can conceptualize it, but until your time horizon starts to shrink, I promise you, you don't. So there's a branch of psychology called terror management theory, TMT. Always reminds me of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Turtle power. And studies prove that being able to recognize our deaths amp up ambition. So I've always been an ambitious person, but no doubt as I enter middle age, it's amped up. There's a Freudian side of it with this Thanatos, and everybody's got kind of their foot in the pond because our deaths really are important. This isn't necessarily a negative thing because it forces us to find this life as precious, our time is precious, and what we do, the legacy that we leave as precious. I'm about to be a father, and I know that that legacy is truly the most important. Talk about terror management theory. If I can push my genes into the future, we'll get to the evolutionary psychology in a minute, but that's part of it. Now, this can also be an incredibly negative thing where people put their death salience into forever projects, such as bombing another country, war, trying to be on the evil side of history. Some theorize that that's what goes on with some of our politicians and some of the decisions that they make. Scary stuff. But our death doesn't have to be our enemy. It can be our friend, and it can motivate us. But I promise you, if you choose to stay stagnant when you think about it, you're going to regret it. Probably cut that out. I don't want to tell people what to do, what to think. I will regret it if I don't. That's more accurate. Our death drives progress. We progress because we know we're going to die. So we build, and without it, we'd probably stagnate. As a species, quick little thought experiment, which will come, we'll do a full episode on this, but with transhumanism coming, are we solving mortality? Does our ambition fizzle? This may be a big problem to solve. And it sounds like I might be on the cutting edge. Bleeding edge? When is it a cutting edge and when is it a bleeding edge? I guess the cut would come first, and technically one would, the cut and then the blood, even if it's milliseconds later. So the cutting edge would be better than the bleeding edge. Well, it depends where you want to be. Maybe you want to be second in. It's probably safer to be second in. And then there's that whole study where it's not the crazy first person out there that makes the crowd come. It's the second. Because they make everybody, there's the weird outliers, and then the second person comes and the crowd goes, oh, this is okay. Because the second person is like, this is society can get in on this. Wow. Tangent. Here we go. It's funny because when asked if I could do it all again, time horizons expanded again, what would I do? I always say the same thing. Evolutionary biologist. And it's funny because I am doing it all again. I'm in school at 40, and I'm going into psychology. But there is a branch of psychology, evolutionary psychology. And what I love about this is our ancestral selves. Because at the end of the day, we are animals. We get so caught up in our tech and transhumanism. We are still biological creatures. We are still animals. We are even fish when you go far enough back. Yeah, we are. So when I use that lens, which I love to put on pretty much anything that's happening in the world, especially my own, I'm hunter-gathering. I'm trying to mate, well, that part of it's done. But I'm trying to get prestige. I'm trying to build a tribe, right? And now we just happen to live in an era where we have a global tribe. And I can speak to so many people through this lens. But maybe that's it. Maybe I'm being completely and utterly primal by doing this. Looking for my people, for survival. Not because of mortality salience. That's on a level of intellect that humans have been lucky enough to garner from this cortex that's grown over top. But I'm talking like that limbic system, that brain stem, our old, original, ancestral brain that's trying to survive. Maybe this is my way of trying to survive. To form alliances, to build a safety net with my people, my tribe, and we can all hunt together. Whew. gives me goosebumps. My nipples are hard. Like, that's my evolutionary stuff. I got Darwin fish tattooed over here. Big fan of that guy's ideas, where we came from. Woo. That was more straight up stuff. That was more like bare bones. We could kind of tie that back to real concepts, but let's have a little fun with this. Let's reach out into the ether. Simulation theory. Like my story, remember the whole Joseph Campbell hero's journey? My story seems eerily perfect and incredible. And we live in a Goldilocks zone with a perfect moon in orbit to control our oceans. And we have water. Anyways, you could work this down to single cells. What if this is just some simulation? What if we're on simulation 500,451? Or even hundreds of thousands, millions, billions, trillions more? To tie it back to the ambition part of things, what if through each of these simulations, we do just one more thing right? So what if this ambition, this drive, this need to produce, to create, what if that is a past echo of simulations guiding us? And you could even take it a step further with our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Maybe we do have a kind of free will, but they're still guided by past simulations. And maybe that's what cognitive dissonance is. Remember that? That's where we have our thoughts are one thing, but our guts and our heart say something completely different. And you can defy your gut and your heart. Feel free. But man, you're not going to feel good up here. Maybe that's a past echo. Maybe that's a past you being like, okay, make your decisions, but... And when I apply my life to that, I didn't get I had a lot of fun, but I didn't get my together until I'm like around 40. So all that time that I was suffering, maybe my past echoes were like, dude, please, please, please. And maybe through each simulation, maybe I get it one day earlier, living my salvation. Or maybe I get it an hour earlier, or a minute earlier, or a second earlier, or a millisecond. Time is a flat plane. Maybe this is just all happening at once. Maybe it is determinism, and we have a destined fate where we're going to end up. I mean, technically, we do. This one messed me up when I was thinking about my death, was I'm going to be, all my places I've ever been are going to wind up to there. And when I think that I did die in that trailer, that was showing me what my life could have been like if I didn't strive and break out and go get the job at the university and start this and wife and child. We are on a collision course with that moment. Is it predetermined? Are there echoes? Is that what when I was telling you about flow state? Is that what the flow state is? Is that a future ripple of us being like, good, keep going, keep going? High concept. And I figured it out on this simulation at 40. But what if there was a simulation where my self made it all the way through without listening at all? As much as I hate finding the right track later in life, most advantageous, best track set up to win, best track to find happiness, best track that helps others find happiness. Anyways, I'm just trying to find the best way to define that. Better late than never. Better late than never. I remember that being a theme when I was in therapy because I was pissed that it was taking me 30-something years to start to get my stuff together. And my therapist said that, better late than never. So I don't care how old you are. Doesn't matter. Go out and get that degree. Find that partner. Make a difference in the world. You're still breathing. Okay, so we went abstract, psychoanalytical into the concrete science, into something kind of fun. But now let's go to the next level of out there. God. If I had to distill it all down, right to a simmer, and you ask me why I have ambition, why I'm doing this, God. I am being told by God. I wake up in the middle of the night, and there is something pushing me to do this that goes way beyond me. We will go deep as heck on this one, but just to label for context safe, even though it is completely ineffable, a bit paradoxical. Anyways, I do consider myself, once I examined my spirituality, as a pantheist. A pantheist is someone who sees God in everything that has ever existed, that currently exists, that ever will exist. Everything. Pantheist. Even this camera lens. Even this camera lens. God. Evidence. Those atoms. Adam and Eve. Did I just discover something? But that being said, I have evolved to get to this place, and I'm opening to that evolving further. Pantheist for now. Something else in the future. Who knows? I did not see this coming, therefore, but it does feel like something else, something more. And I didn't understand it until my big trip, until I suffered, until I went through hell, until I resurfaced, until I was told by my spiritual leaders that you might be having, a spiritual coming out party. It's like explaining quantum computing to somebody in the 1700s. Gobbledygook. That's how I felt about the concept of God up until my experience. I mean, now, even in the zeitgeist today, you can talk about quantum computing thanks to movies like Ant-Man, the quantum realm. And people have a general idea of Schrodinger's box. Is the cat alive or dead? It is both. Quantum entanglement and everything subatomic. People get a general idea of that, and that's how I personally look at my relationship with God. Everything up until now, I didn't understand it. Now, that being said, the funny thing was my spiritual guide, dear friend, family, Nessa from North Haven, said this beautiful thing in Hebrew. There's a saying that actually I don't have this one written down, so I won't even bother trying to remember it, but the translation was God's breath. I always had God's breath. And that one really resonated with me. So that's my simmer. If I had to simmer it down, that's it. I have to do this because of a higher power. And that removes a whole lot of self from it. Makes it a lot more selfless. And trying to help other people. Because clearly from my story, self was a lot of my problem. So, okay, wait, I know that was the simmer down, but I got one more, which is totally blasphemous to bring up something after saying it would, for me, this is God. I'm doing this for God. But methinks God's got a great sense of humor, and it would appreciate it. Entropy. Right? That's the final answer to kind of that we can apply to everything. Totally random. This universe is totally random. My existence is totally random. Me doing this is totally random. It's all just random. It's a drawer of string that has been intertwined. That's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I have ambition, drive, random. And every time I use it, random. That's a possibility too. Now here's the big kind of important part. I said why I'm doing this is because God told me is the simmered down version. I kept saying that very intentionally, because that's if I had a weapon to my head and it said you need to say one thing, it would be that. However, the real answer is nuanced. It's all the above. An infinite more that I can't even think of because it's beyond my understanding, or just I'm not educated enough. That's kind of the key to this podcast. It's all of these things. It's a continuum. And so are all of our thoughts and beliefs and actions and motivations. It is so fun to ponder these things. It's fun to thought experiment. It's fun to explore our psyches and others. But it's so important to remember how complex every person, every situation is. 40 years for me led to this moment, plus the years of my mom and my dad meeting, plus the years of all of that from that first single-celled organism, extreme but true, led to this moment of me and doing this, and into my child and doing whatever the heck she wants to do. That's how complex our decisions are. So the answer is all of the above. And when I say all, I mean everything. But we can still distill it down. Maybe I'm just hungry and somebody offered me a delicious cheeseburger to do this. They said, we will give you a quarter pounder with cheese if you do this podcast. And I was like, yes, I will do that. In that case, it's a very easy decision. With a milkshake. Shamrock shake. This is not a sponsor of this podcast. I almost hummed the tune, but I would copyright infringement. It's a real thing. And that's another episode, the Wild West of copyright infringement. We'll get into it. So to wrap up the ambition side of it, to apply Aristotle, virtue is a mean. From my experience, virtue, balance needs to be applied to ambition. It ought not be like Victor Frankenstein, unchecked, reckless ambition that can create a monster. But it also ought not be timid, like the idea of me avoiding doing this podcast. I would be missing out on something that I feel personally that I was tapped on the shoulder to do. That would have been a regret at the end of my life as my time horizon shrinks. So we're here, we're shooting this, which means I'm not letting this happen. I'm not going to be timid. But I have considered this, bring the two together, into balance, doing this, but also not going unchecked. Kind of the whole thing I'm going to be getting at constantly in this. Check yourself, because I keep checking myself, and it helps. As I said, the structure of this, I'll show you, not tell you. We start off with the preamble, with the history, and then we get into a little analysis part, like a therapy session. Oh, what about wait? There's one more part. I know this is the longest thing ever. Is anyone still watching this? Probably not. Just filling up a server somewhere. The final twist is always we'll do a thought experiment. Bear with me. I have now had this new relationship with God. I see doing this podcast as if I'm being told by God to do this. So, thought about it. I've heard of other people in this world being told by God to do things. I think of bombers, murderers. I know, bit of a curveball here. Bear with me. Okay. Now, in no way, shape, or form do I condone what any person has done in such a way that is clearly evil. Do not condone, not okay, zero. Violence is never the answer. I've never so much as punched someone or even thought about it. No violence, no hurting anybody, zero. However, as a thought experiment, I have to look differently at people like Amanda Yates, ISIS recruits, where there's also a level of ethnocentricity built into it. But knowing my connection now to saying that phrase, which is acceptable because I'm doing something harmless, that cognitive dissonance thing, to be able to go to sleep at night comfortable, I need to be consistent. And therefore, now that I have an understanding of my relationship with being told by God to do something, I have to look at their actions in a different way. They should be punished for their crimes, breaking the law, hurting people. However, their reasoning behind it, I have a level of understanding that I didn't have before exploring my own thoughts behind this. And I think that's an important exercise that we can all do, is to really seek to understand other people and their emotions, other people and their motivations. God, it's complex. Whew. Saved the most taxing for last because I'm going to take a nap after this. That's the world. That's the universe. I just wish that those people would sublimate. Here we are, sublimating podcast. I wish people who were told by their God to hurt people start a podcast. Talk about it. Please talk about it. Don't hurt. And although I may have a new understanding for where these people had their calling from God, where they are flawed is that they listened. Now, if I apply my lens to this, it is when I was in the throes of ideation. There were no other options than that. It was what I had to do. But I'm still here. At the time, I didn't have the spiritual connection to God, but I was my own God, my agnostic, atheistic way. I was God. I was the one who made decisions. I considered myself having free will. And I didn't do it. And despite having that voice in my head, that feeling within me, which goes beyond any kind of intellect, I still didn't do it. There was something bigger in me that saw my worth, my value, what I had to do, how much that would hurt other people. In this way, people who do harm and claim being told by God are inherently flawed. Forget determinism, self-determination theory. Let's say we have free will, we have a choice. That choice can never go there. And to do that is evil. Maybe your God does tell you to do something heinous. You need to show your morals, values, and oneness to fight that urge. But nuance. I now must admit, I understand where they're coming from. And this is a new idea for me. The evolution of thought, understanding, and empathy toward other people. Whew. Now, I am obliged to apply my own proposed lens for this whole podcast to this concept. I'll make it very brief because this will go on forever. But the one thing I will say about people who may use the concept of God told me to do it for negative, or even some for positive, the one co-founding variable, the one spurious variable, is that easily manipulated. Even me. Maybe there have been things along the way that have manipulated this into me to even say that, to feel that. And therefore, one thing to remember about these people who commit these heinous crimes, maybe that voice of God was the voice of an ideology being espoused by a person. And there's a chance that this voice from God is a psychiatric condition. I know when I wrestled with DID, dissociative identity disorder, there was the I, there was the stimulus, and then there was the me who reacted through the lens of society and my conditioning, which follows George Herbert Mead's theory of social psychology. I still had the me had the final say in how I reacted to the voice. Maybe they didn't, but the idea of somebody told me to do something means there's still an omniscience. There's still your decision to be made. And I know I got some wild instructions from my inner voice, that secondary voice, I should say, but I chose to not act. Obviously, a million ways to break it down, but I just, for the sake of my concept of the podcast, we need to at least have one flipping the script, you know? Whew. I promise nuance. All of the nuance, all of the sides is what we're going for here. Please, echoes are okay, but if you disagree with me on any of this, it's even more welcome, because discourse is so key. And in a world that's becoming, in a way, we're being manipulated into being more and more polarized, we need to be able to have peaceful discourse. So please hit me up privately, comment, whatever, please. The end. Remember, virtue is a mean, and comfort within ambiguity, that's a sign of intelligence. And do not take yourself so seriously. Y'all come back now, you hear? What is this? We've sprung a leak. It's raining inside. My wife's water broke. I gotta go have a daughter.